Swing and a drive. Herrera ambushes. Did he keep that fair? He did. A solo home run ties our game. Swing and a drive. Herrera admires another one. Off the facade of Big Mac Wing. And a high drive by Herrera. It's a 3-homer game. Way into Big Mac land.
He can hit. He can really hit. He puts together incredible at-bats. Rarely swings and misses. It just takes a professional at-bat, man. But those were 3 really, really good swings. So happy to see that out of him. Clubhouse is absolutely loving it right now. So very positive day.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex Ferrario will join us shortly live from Enterprise Center, where he's going to be broadcasting the Blues versus the Penguins game later on this evening. Ivan Herrera with a 3-homer day yesterday at 24 years old. Herrera became the youngest Cardinals catcher to have a multi-home run game and the 5th youngest catcher in Major League history to hit 3 home runs in a game. He is also the first Cardinals position player to have 3 homers in a game since Goldie did so back in 2023. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You can check us out on YouTube as well at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. Ivan Herrera, since the beginning of last season, T-Bone, is batting .311. He has an on-base percentage of .385. In just 77 games, he has 14 doubles and 8 home runs. Ivan Herrera is a certifiable good hitter at the major league level. That has never really been the question for him. The question is, can he play enough defense to stay on the field as a major league catcher? Well, we'll get into that here in just a little bit. I want to talk about that bat, because for years the Cardinals have been looking for a potential star at the plate. Again, set aside the defense side of things. They want to develop a star-level hitter. I don't know if Ivan Herrera is that, will become that, where he's at on that spectrum. But dude, right now, with what we've seen from him over the last 2 seasons, at the age of 25 this year, this is what it would look like if Ivan Herrera was going to be a star at the major league level. He has the kind of at-bats that we thought Jordan Walker would be taking. This is an all-around hitter where he can hit for average. He can get on base. He does have a little more pop in that bat than I think certainly you expected coming into the season. Ivan Herrera is turning heads right now. This is the kind of player that the Cardinals were lacking. Here's to hoping he can become it.
Yeah, he looks like that middle-of-the-order bat that I kept saying. Like, I just don't know where they're getting that kind of production. Who's the guy that you can pencil in? And I'm not saying he's here yet, but a 30-homer, 100 RBI guy. I don't know if he's a 30-homer guy, but let me tell you, my eyes definitely are more open to him having more home run power than I originally thought. I thought he was going to be more of a doubles machine than he was a home run guy. But, man, watching him yesterday, those were not cheap shots. All 3 of those were bombs out to left field. He looks great at the plate right now offensively. He looks like the guy that you are talking about of, hey, the Cardinals have been really looking for that guy that they can develop internally, that'll be cost controlled, that can be a guy that is an impact bat for them. And Ivan Herrera looks like that. He has the profile of everything. Hits for average, gets on base, has the slugging that you were talking about there. He looks like a guy that I could totally see them moving up into this order in a couple of weeks when they say, you know what, Donovan's been good for us in that 3 spot. You know what, let's add a little bit more pop in there. Let's move Ivan Herrera up there if he sticks in this lineup.
This is the stuff that gets you excited as a fan. You see this kind of potential in a player, and you think to yourself, what could this be, right? It's like opening up your Christmas presents on Christmas Day, where you're just looking at them, and they're all unopened, they're all unopened, and you've got to see what's behind the wrapping paper, and it could be anything, right? And you're like partially into this with Ivan Herrera now, where you were asking for this one gift, right? You needed, I was 14 years old. All I wanted was an Xbox 360. It's the only thing I wanted in the world. And you get about halfway through and you see that little label. And you're like, I think this might be it. This might be the thing that I have been waiting for. And that feels like where we're at with Ivan Herrera right now. You can't quite see the label, but you're getting close. And you're thinking to yourself, this might be it, man. Again, it's super early. It's a small sample size, relatively speaking. It's only about 300 at-bats since the start of last year. But, man, it is impossible for me not to get excited when you see a 3-home run day out of this guy. You see him go last year with a 300 average. That should play in this particular fan base. Like, A 300 average is hard to do. I don't care if it's only over 250 plate appearances. That is something you just don't see in Major League Baseball anymore. And if he can do this while staying behind the plate, he's going to be the best hitting catcher in Major League Baseball.
100%.
You might have a William Contreras level hitter behind the plate for you. The amount of value that this holds, if it works behind the plate, it's hard to overstate, man, because this is not the profile that you typically see from guys that are playing that position.
And I think the most important part about, I mean, you mentioned him behind the plate. He's right-handed too, which is so big for the Cardinals because most of their guys that they've got right now are the lefty profile. They've got too many lefties. They needed to develop somebody from the right side. And the hope was, okay, maybe that can be Jordan Walker. If it's Walker, it's Herrera, it doesn't matter. They needed a right-handed bat to really develop for the middle of this order. And what you're seeing from him, I like. Now, I'm not going to lie. I agree with the whole, hey, it was kind of like Christmas when you open up and you're like, oh, is that the Xbox maybe? And you asked for it. I also got a little frustrated yesterday just on the fact that this team sent this guy down last year, watching his bat, and they sent him down because of defense. What a ridiculous thing that was from a year ago. It felt like I got teased last year, and now I'm really getting the Xbox 2 years later when I asked for it.
Hopefully he can stick behind the plate. There was an interesting quote last night from Ollie Marmol. It was clear seeing him up at the podium yesterday, like, Ollie's excited about this as well. Here's what he had to say when he was asked about what the ceiling looks like potentially for Ivan Herrera.
He's a confident kid regardless of how it's going. He just carries himself that way. And he's hit his whole career. And he's doing it against some of the best here. So no one knows what that ceiling looks like, but it's high.
It is really high. If he can stay behind the plate. We got this. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line from the 314. Oh boy, weren't you guys the same ones talking about getting rid of him last year because of his poor defense? No, sir. Absolutely not.
You're thinking of the wrong show.
We were talking about holding on to this asset because of what you're seeing right now. But if the Cardinals didn't believe that he was a catcher, we feared that they would trade him in the offseason because they didn't see where to put him defensively. This is why you move Wilson Contreras. Wilson Contreras isn't at first base just because. They wanted to find out what Ivan Herrera could be behind the plate. And now we're going to see it. So I think the question is, how good does he have to be defensively in order to stay in the lineup every day? Because it's going to get really crowded if Herrera cannot stay back there. If they determine, you know what, we value defense too much, and we don't see this guy translating to the major leagues behind the plate, which is possible. That's in the range of outcomes for him. If they view it that way, I don't know how you make this work at first base slash DH. We've got like 4 dudes for those 2 spots now. And with the way that you've seen Luken Baker hit against lefties, he needs to get into the lineup regular. You're not taking Wilson Contreras out of this lineup. Nolan Gorman has to get at-bats somewhere. Alec Burleson has to get at-bats somewhere. And then if you throw Herrera into that mix, good luck. You can't make it work. Eventually, it's just too many guys for too few spots into your lineup. What does he have to look like defensively for you, T-Bone, to keep him back there?
See, I would flip that question. I think it is not how good does Herrera have to look defensively to be in the lineup. I think it is how good offensively does Herrera have to be in the lineup, because I just don't know if his defense is going to be fixable. I mean, they're already talking about him having trouble getting guys out. We're 6 games into the year, and he had a whole offseason to work on it. So I think the question for me is, how good does he have to be offensively to live with the woes of his defense? And we've seen teams that end up doing this a lot, especially when you had the pitcher hitting in the National League. Like, I think of J.D. Martinez, guy that's totally a DH, and the Diamondbacks trade for him and said, yeah, we'll take that offense and we'll like throw him in a corner in our outfield and hopefully make the playoffs. I think that's what the question is for the Cardinals is, hey, if this guy continues to hit, we will live with his defensive limits, and we will just replace him when we think we've gotten to that perfect sweet spot, which I know Ollie has talked about multiple times already. If it's very difficult to figure out when his last at-bat is, and we bring out the hands team, if he doesn't hit, and I just don't think the defense is then going to be there to make up for him being in the lineup. And that's why I think it will be curious to see how the Cardinals react when he goes through his first 0-for-20 slump. Every player has one of those. I'll be fascinated to know how they react, because I think it's all about the offense that keeps him in the lineup, nothing to do with any kind of defensive improvement.
I think he might be a 300 hitter. I think this might be what he is. And if it is, I'm willing to live with whatever the limitations are. I don't know that the Cardinals will be, though. it's not my decision. It's their decision, and they truly do value defense. Right, wrong, indifferent, however you view it, that is their worldview as a coaching staff, is they view defense as being very important, especially coming off of that disastrous 2023 season. They don't want a repeat of that. They learned a lot of lessons that year, and one of them is we can't have below average defenders on the field. We value athleticism. We value the ability to pick it, and behind the plate especially, we saw that with Wilson Contreras. They didn't want to live that life any longer. And now you're seeing it again with Ivan Herrera, where it's a question of what do they see in him. But no matter what, this is a guy you have to get in the lineup every day. You have to. You have to find a spot in. If that means moving other guys, if that means Wilson Contreras is suddenly your DH, so be it. If that means Wilson Contreras is your everyday first baseman and he is never getting a DH opportunity because Herrera has suddenly become that, cool. If this offseason, and I know people are going to laugh at it, I don't think this is the likely outcome here. But if they decide, hey, we're going to try him in a corner, I'm cool with that as well. If this bat plays the way that it looks like it is right now, that is somebody that you have to start building around. He is that special when he is up at the plate. With Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex Ferrario is going to be joining us shortly here on BK and Ferrario. Again, he's down at Enterprise Center today, where the Blues will be taking on the Penguins later on this evening. Pre-game coverage for that starting at 6, puck drop at 7. We do want to hear from you. YouTube.com/101ESPN STL is where the graveyard chat is available for you guys today. We're always over there. Also, 314-399-9646. That is the Air Comfort Service text line. We are going to be joined by Joey Vitale at 11:30. We've got Rob Cerfolio, Cardinals assistant GM. He's been tasked with basically being in charge of the minor league system. It's basically Heimblum 1, Rob Cerfolio 2, then the farm director. Rob Cerfolio is going to join us coming up at 12 o'clock. We also have Mike Kelly of NHL Network at 1 o'clock as well. So a jam-packed show for all of you today. Coming up next, we talked a little bit about Herrera and his day yesterday. It's not just him. This offense as a whole has been fantastic to start out the season. We'll give you some of what their mile markers have been thus far, and we'll talk big picture about what they could be next year on 101 ESPN.
a really good feeling, especially leading into an off day, and you get to kind of sit on that for a little bit, clear your head, and then go back at it. That was important for them. But you can see what the lineup looks like when those two contribute the way they did today. Mason with the base hit and then laying down that bunt. That's a big part of it. And him and Scott back-to-back just adding pressure with their speed. And then Contreras taking better swings today as well. So those two guys can start contributing to their abilities, which that's coming, man. I mean, both of them are good hitters. It could be a lot of fun to watch. It really can.
That was Ollie Marmol after the game yesterday talking about the Cardinals offense. Yes, Ivan Herrera was the headliner, but let's not lose sight of the fact that the Cardinals offense overall was pretty damn good once again yesterday. With Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex Ferrario will be joining us momentarily at Enterprise Center, where the Blues are playing the Penguins later on tonight. He'll be on the call for that one once again. Cardinals finished the game with 12 runs, but also 12 hits. They reached base 20 times yesterday. Let me say that one more time. 20 times they reached base. They have now produced at least 10 hits in all 6 games so far this season. They are the first team to do that in the first 6 games of a season since 2015. So it's been a decade since we've seen a team start this way with their hits. Rockies and Tigers did it back in 2015. If you're looking at Cardinals history, the most recent time that they opened a season with 6 straight games in which they produced at least 10 hits, 1966. They also did so in 1956 and 1901. So this is the 4th time in the last 125 years that the Cardinals have had at least 10 hits in each of their first 6 games of the regular season. They are doing the things that we all wanted to see. They're going up there. They have a clear approach whenever they get to the plate. They're taking what the pitcher gives them. They're going back wherever the pitch was. They're swinging and trying to hit it in that direction. They're not trying to pull everything in the air. That's not something that works for this team, man. They have some guys that profile that way. Lars Nootbaar, dead pull hitter. That's where his power is at. He can hit all fields, but he's a dead pull hitter for his power. Nolan Arenado, just a flat-out dead pull hitter. That is what he is. It's what he's always been in his career. I'm not sure there's anybody else necessarily on this team that is that. All the other guys need to take their hits wherever they are for them. And that's what they've done so far this year. I have been highly impressed with this offense thus far. I am curious from the text line. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line, and the YouTube chat is available as well, youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. Are you believing what we're seeing? Because it's 6 games, 3 of them were against the Angels, and 3 of them were against the Twins team that we don't know how good they're going to be. But are you starting to buy into this offense more than what you expected to, T-Bone?
I am, because I was a little skeptical of seeing a bounce-back season from a Jordan Walker, Nolan Gorman at the time. And, of course, Gorman's still not a guy that's in their starting 9. But I was a little skeptical that you were going to see that. And I didn't know what to expect from Lars Nootbaar. He's a guy that always starts off cold for the St. Louis Cardinals. And he's been great in the early going. And Victor Scott, too, by the way, a guy that last year you could tell was outmatched. Looked different in spring training. It's why I was willing to carry him on the opening day roster. I just didn't know how much that was really going to translate, though. And the early signs are these guys have made adjustments, and this offense is balanced 1 through 9 to where, like you're saying, you've got some guys that are going to be the pull-heavy type guys, like an Arenado, but you've also got the guys that are just going to slap the ball in play. Like Mason Wynn's single. He's been hitting the ball hard to his credit, even though he's only got the 1 hit. Just a single. That's all you need. Victor's guy yesterday in that game, he can hit for a little power. What's he do? He lays down a bunt to get a runner over. Oh, and by the way, he beats it out because he's so freaking fast. They've got guys that can get on base. They got guys that can slug, and they're doing it all in just different ways, and they're coming through with runners in scoring position. The part that's impressive to me is the at-bats look difficult for the starting pitchers, or for the pitchers in general, I should say. Everything just looks hard to get the Cardinals out right now, and that is something that I don't think just dissipates. And I don't think that is just something that you look at and go, well, it's the Angels and who knows about the Minnesota Twins. No, that's the kind of thing of these at-bats that we are seeing from these guys 1 through 9, that even when they go up against some of the best pitching staffs in baseball, the Dodgers, the Phillies, the Diamondbacks, they should be able to maintain this to where it is tough to get them out. Now, it may not result in getting 10-plus hits against those pitching staffs because they are that good, but this should be something that they can sustain throughout a baseball season. So I'm starting to buy in. I was one of those that was very skeptical of this offense to start the season. I think that these guys are making the proper changes under Brant Brown to get on the attack and really potentially kind of flip the season on its head, because I think their pitching is going to be fine. I don't think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be fine. If their offense hits, they're going to have themselves a shot.
Cardinals as a team are batting .298 on the season. Now, some of that is good fortune. They're not going to bat .298 as a team for the entirety of the year. You look up and down this lineup, and it's a bunch of dudes that are hitting like .450, and then other like 2 or 3 guys that are like .050.
Yeah, I do a lot of Division II and lower college baseball. A lot of lineups look like this with the high batting averages.
Yeah, but they have legitimately been hitting the ball hard. Some of this is just they're playing good baseball, man. We got this from the 636. I think it's an interesting point. Guys, I am starting to buy into it a bit, but it's mind-blowing to me how the Cards are just using a fundamental hitting approach, and that's an earth-shattering idea nowadays. If you don't have superstars, then you have to be fundamentally sound, and they should have been doing that for forever. I think there is some fair critiques in there. I think sometimes when you have these like new ideas, I don't even know how new they are, but newer ideas that spread across the league. Everybody wants to be the smartest guy in the room, right? And they want to follow or lead in that direction. And so what you see is, and the Yankees got a lot of criticism for this in recent seasons as well, everybody becomes a cookie cutter approach. Hey, everybody should be hitting the ball in the air to your pull side. Why? Because when you look at the numbers, that is where the best production is going to come from. You will have the most success if you pull the ball and put the ball in the air. So everybody tries to do that. Here's the problem. Not everybody's capable of that. That's not how everybody should hit. That's not how Mason Wynn needs to hit. Mason Wynn should be collecting his hits wherever they are, especially if they are going the other way, going up the middle. Victor Scott, same thing. Hey, sometimes Victor Scott, the best play for you, lay down a perfectly placed bunt. It might be a hit for you. For other guys, that's the worst case scenario. Luke and Baker, please never do what Victor Scott did yesterday.
Contreras, never again.
It's got to be an individualized approach for everybody. Different guys have different skill sets. Alex Ferrario has also been highly critical of this offense in recent seasons. Justifiably so. I have been wrong. I finally get the opportunity to say that I look to be so far right about the offense. It just took, 2 years beyond what I expected it to be. Alex joining us now at Enterprise Center, where he'll be calling the game tonight between the Blues and the Penguins. Alex, this is your first opportunity to speak on it. Ivan Herrera, 3 home runs yesterday, but overall the offense, they get on base 20 times. Are you starting to buy into what you are seeing with the offensive approach?
I absolutely am. I absolutely am, because this isn't like a one-off and for a bunch of veterans who have just been around for a long time and are having a hot streak. Like, you're talking about the young guys that are giving runway, and they're also coming through with it. And I mean, honestly, and I know this is all small sample size, and I have been the harshest critic on this offense, guys, but Brant Brown is making a believer out of me. Like, if Brant Brown wanted to start a batting cult, I would probably join in and give him my life savings. Because just hearing him talk, hearing him explain the batting approach, and it was one of the quotes that I heard earlier today. TMA was playing it, where Brant Brown was talking about, like, look, this isn't about
Alex,
what the
I've got that quote. You want to hear it real quick?
Please.
Let's go ahead and play this. This is via KMOV. They tweeted this out yesterday. Brant Brown of the Cardinals trying to take the fight to the opposition.
As much as being a hitting coach can be complicated, is like we try to condense everything into a simple aspect of, it's not what he's trying to do to us, it's what we're going to do to them, and stick to that. And they all know what their strengths are. So at the end of the day, we're going to play to our strengths. And like, you can't cover the whole plate. You can't cover everything. So if he aces a pitch and you're trusting your eyes and it's not where you want it, sometimes you got to tip your cap. And we're basically playing like, okay, we may lose a couple battles, but we're going to win the war.
Seriously, like, Brant, do you want my entire children's funds for the rest of their life? Because I'll give them to you, because I'm believing what you were selling me right now. And it's not just he's saying words and the Cardinals aren't coming through with it. Look at Jordan Walker's turnaround this year.
Yes.
Like, he's not a guy that's just going after pitches anymore. He's waiting for the ones that he can capitalize on. So Ivan Herrera having the day yesterday. Jordan Walker's had good at-bats this season so far. No, Lars Nootbaar has looked great. Yes, I am buying into this offense because it's young guys that are actually looking comfortable at the plate.
It's been impressive, and they clearly have a plan. That's the thing.
Yes.
Like, sometimes when you see the results and you're like, okay, everybody's just swinging for the fences and it's working out for them right now. I don't know how much credit you want to give to the hitting coach in that scenario. What you're seeing right now is, like, you hear Brant Brown talk, and then I watch that happen on the field. They are executing on his game plan, And that's like watching a football game where you see the defense and they talk all preseason about, hey, we're going to be multiple. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to get after the quarterback. And then whenever a guy ends up making a catch, we're bringing him down to the ground. First guy's got to make that tackle. And then when you actually see that stuff implemented on the field, it's like, okay, it wasn't just word vomit and coach speak that you hear before the season. I never know how much to put credit into the conversations that we have, Alex, on this show. You just never know. Some of it is guys are just good talkers. Like, I didn't know when we talked to Brant Brown, is this just a guy that's a good talker, or is there really something here? Because when we talked to Brant Brown during this past offseason, Alex, I know you felt the same thing after our conversation. That's a guy that I would like to play for. That's a guy that seems like he has a clear philosophy, and it sounds like he is a good communicator, which is super important in that role because you need to get buy-in from your players. If they don't trust you, if they don't believe that you are prepared, there is no reason for them to listen to you. And hearing Brant Brown talk, whether it was our conversation with him or the multiple interviews that he's already done so far this year, or just hearing the guys talk about him, it is clear they know he's got our back. He's got a plan, and we trust in that plan right now. And maybe most importantly, we're seeing the results of that plan quickly.
Yeah, well, I mean, the same thing can be said for what Jim Montgomery's already impacted. I know it's a head coach versus a hitting coach, but essentially the hitting coach is the head coach for the batters right now. When you trust what the guy is selling you, you're going to go out there and try and convert it. And people have been wanting Albert Pujols as the manager since he retired from baseball. Well, Albert Pujols is the one that told the Cardinals Brant Brown would be the guy, and look at what he's already impacting them with.
It's been a hell of a lot of fun to watch. I'm personally enjoying it. I also think they deserve a lot of credit for battling back the way that they have.
Yeah. It's fun, BK. It's fun.
It is. They were down 3-1 on Tuesday in the third inning, ended up coming back in the eighth, and then they were down in the 10th inning, 6-3, find a way to battle back in that one. And then yesterday, they're down 5-3 in the top of the seventh. They respond in the bottom of that inning. That's the kind of stuff that you watch. You're like, all right, there might be something different here. I don't know. We're early on. It's only 6 games, but it might be different. It certainly feels different with what we've been watching so far. He's Alex Ferrario. He's broadcasting live today for us out of the Enterprise Center where the Blues are taking on the Penguins later on this evening. T-Bone and BK here back in the studio with you guys. Coming up next, Joey Vitale is going to join us here on BK and Ferrario.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues back in action tonight as they host the Pittsburgh Penguins as they look to extend their winning streak to 11 games. Well, pregame coverage tonight starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario. Then Alex and Joey will have puck drop for you at 7 o'clock tonight here on your home of the Blues 101 ESPN. Cardinals off today before tomorrow. They start a 3-game set at the Boston Red Sox. Tomorrow will be Eric Fedde on the mound for St. Louis. Walker Buehler will get the start for Boston. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. CedarLondoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN, and we are happy to go out to the Callie and Thompson hotline, as we do each and every Thursday, to be joined by our friend and the Blues analyst for 101 ESPN and FanDuel Sports Midwest. He is Joey Vitale joining us here on the show. Joe, we appreciate the time as always. How you doing today, my friend?
Joey! Aren't you sick of Alex yet?
That was weak sauce, boys. That was weak sauce.
Alex is out at Enterprise Center, and it kind of threw that off a little bit, Joe. We apologize.
There's a lag.
Let's not let that happen again. Come on.
You know what? I'm ashamed for me and my family, Joe, so I apologize.
Thank you. You should.
All right, Joe, let's get into this. That might have been a week the Blues very much have not been. They've won 10 in a row. They're playing just unbelievable hockey right now. I was a little nervous on Tuesday. I'm not going to lie to you. I was out there at Enterprise Center, and I thought I was going to be the reason that the Blues lost for the first time in about a month or so. How do they keep doing this, Joey? How do they find ways to come back the way that they did against Detroit?
Well, BK, they have a little bit of everything, and they have everything's clicking at the right time. And when everything is cohesive and clicking, you can lean on different ways to win games. A lot of teams are one-dimensional, two-dimensional. The Blues right now are 3, 4, 5-dimensional. It's the goaltending's been good. The special teams have been good. The top 6 forwards have been good. Our D-core is playing as steady as any D-core in the National Hockey League. Your fourth line, you maybe have the best, most consistent fourth line in the National Hockey League with those 3 guys as far as creating momentum in games. So you look at all of that, you have, 7 or 8 really good pieces going right now. So when 2 or 3 pieces fall off, then all of a sudden you still got 3 or 4 other pieces that are going to pick up the slack. Sometimes you have 5 and 6 things fall off, like we saw a little bit in the Nashville-Chicago back-to-back last weekend. But against bad teams, you end up finding the goal scoring late and they get in the save late. So when you look at teams that are on consistent runs like this, the cliche in the sport is you're finding ways to win. And what they mean by that is everyone is going very consistently right now. So it really just, you don't necessarily need 1 or 2 things to go right. Basically 3 or 4 things could go wrong. You're still going to find a way because everyone's just clicking on all cylinders.
Joe, I was having this conversation with Bolduc a little bit ago down in the locker room, just talking about the power play and why it's been so effective. And it's something that you've talked a lot about and why I think the 5-on-5 has been so effective. We're starting to really see the Blues play that positionless hockey to where everyone is a threat to score at any point.
Yeah, listen, they're setting themselves up in the right areas of the ice to shoot the puck. For Bolduc on the power play, you see the way he's kind of getting lost in those spaces. He's kind of hiding in the weeds and then ducks into certain areas where things open up. 5-on-5, the offensive zone there is as chaotic as it can be and as ever-flowing that this game is. You're starting to see some structural spots and spaces that are available where not only players are going to, but the puck carriers are giving the puck to. For an example, if in the offensive zone tonight against these Penguins, you're in the right corner in the offensive zone. Once you feel pressure, where are your outlets, right? The biggest outlet is either a soft chip behind the net, directly behind the net, where a player can be there, or it's a hard rim behind the net to the weak side D. Those have to be predictable plays, not only for the puck carrier because he's under pressure, he's probably getting outnumbered, so he needs a release option. But then again, it's the accountability of the players around them to be available behind the net, or for that weak side D to understand that this hard rim could be coming my way. I got to be on my toes because this is the release pressure option that the guy in the forward is going to give me to kind of find a little bit more time and space. So I think, under Drew Bannister this year, there were times in the offensive zone where it was just kind of like a one-on-one and then a two-on-two, and then you're just like, hey, go make a hockey play, try to make a good play, and we'll figure it out. But now it's that structural accountability of being in the right spots and spaces where your teammates can find you to ultimately release pressure, and then that can really help set up the offensive zone time.
We're talking to Joey Vitale here on 101 ESPN, Blues analyst, of course, for 101 ESPN and FanDuel Sports Midwest. Joe, I wanted to ask you about Jordan Kyrou. He's on pace for, once again, 35-plus goals, but the difference this year, he leads the team in plus-minus. I'm curious for you, whether it's a conversation that you've had around the team or just from your own perspective, what do you think was the pivot point for Kyrou, where things started to click for him? Do you have a moment in mind or anything in particular that's led to this kind of version of Jordan Kyrou?
I don't know if there's one play. I don't know if there was one game, BK, that really jumps off the page. I really do think, though, that he is one of those, especially those few players that just found a whole nother level under Jim Montgomery. I look at Zachary Bolduc, the way he has just blossomed. A player that had no goals before Jim Montgomery showed up. He had 2 on the very first night under Montgomery, and then has gone nothing but be on a tear where a lot of the league is starting to recognize him as maybe one of the top rookies in the league. I think Jordan Kyrou is the same thing. I think these young players really thrive under having good communication and having a coach that feels kind of like their best friend. And I think that's what Monty does. I think Monty's so good about instilling confidence in young players because he believes in them. There's a lot of old school coaches and old souls in this league still that feel like they need to be that like dictator type of coach and be hard on players and demand that level of respect and hoot and holler and yell and scream, the John Tortorella types. And there are young players in this league that just do not respond well to it. And I think that's what Jim has come in. Jim believes in Jordan Kyrou, and Jordan feels that, right? Jim Montgomery, I truly think he looks at every player on that team and thinks they are the best at their position across the National Hockey League. And I think Marty St. Louis, from what I understand for Montreal, is in a similar spot. He just has so much belief in his players. Now, if you're a player under Jim Montgomery and you feel like your coach thinks you are the best, let's just look at the best fourth-line center in the league. If you're Radek Faksa and Monty looks at you like you are the best fourth-line center and he really believes that, well, what's that going to do for the confidence of Radek Faksa? I mean, this whole game is confidence. I was joking with Braden Shen this morning. I was doing a coach's interview, and you'll hear it later on the broadcast tonight, but Montgomery, talked about Patrice Bergeron and Braden Shen and the similarities in their leadership. And he said one thing that stands out about 2 of these leaders, and because Braden Shen has just not gotten enough credit for this turnaround, is that, Shen and Patrice, they both have this ability to be super empathetic for their teammates. Like this idea of empathy, of being of service to your teammates is something that stood out. I told Braden that. I go, hey, Coach had a great comment about you this morning. He goes, what was it? And I told him. And he goes, whew, that helps my confidence. And I was like, you never can have enough. He goes, you can never have enough confidence in this game. So what Monty's done for Jordan Kyrou, it's a long, kind of winded, roundabout way to answer your question. He has just believed so deeply in him that he is the best doggone winger in the league. And I think Jordan has felt that. It's given him confidence. And then that confidence just takes over when the skill and the speed, which is already there, and the tools are there. So it's just a whole mindset shift that I think Jim Montgomery's done a heck of a job with Kyrou.
Blues back in action tonight. They are attempting to win their 11th consecutive game, something they have not done since that 2019 season, potentially trying to tie that streak tonight against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Hey, Joe, we appreciate the time as always, man. We look forward to hearing you on the call tonight. All the best, my friend.
That sounds good, boys. You guys have a great one as well.
You got it. That's Joey Vitale joining us as he does each and every Thursday here on BK and Ferrario. Appreciate his time as always. That's interesting there, Alex. I know Ben Hockman had a piece that went up earlier today about Braden Shen and what he has meant to the Blues during this streak. From your conversations around the team today, anything else stand out to you about what you heard, whether it was from players or from Jim Montgomery earlier this morning?
Well, I just real quick on that thought.
Sure.
I mean, that should get you even more excited about guys like Snuggerud and Dvorsky, who I know was sent down last night. I mean, the fact that he is able to get the best out of a 32-year-old centerman that I think a lot of people were like, man, he's probably done at this time, or the best is behind him, that gives you even more excitement for guys that are just kind of hitting their peak. And the one conversation I will say that I had with Bolduc a little bit ago, because I was curious, on the power play that they were working on this morning, Jimmy Snuggerud was kind of rotating in and out with Sundqvist as the net front presence. And that's not a Snuggerud role. And so I went to Bolduc and I wanted to ask him, because he's been doing that bumper spot. And I asked him, I said, is bumper a spot you've ever played before? And he goes, no. First time I did it was 6 games ago.
Huh.
And I said, that is wild because you look comfortable there. And he said, the reason it works so well is because we have a ton of shooters on a power play. And he said, we don't have positions. He's like, I may start in the bumper, but Booch may run to the bumper, and I may go to the far side wall. And Robert Thomas is such a distributor that as long as one of us are ready to shoot, we are all a threat for the goaltender. Sure. And so he said it's a positionless brand of hockey. And he said, I don't feel suffocated as much on the ice. He said, when I was on the one-timer in juniors and in the AHL, I would always be in one spot and you wait for the puck. And he said, you feel suffocated because guys read that, they close you in, you don't get the shot off, and then the puck comes out of the zone. But he said, when you play positionless hockey, you could float wherever you want. In your expertise, the other team doesn't know how to handle it. So keep an eye on that. I think it's working at 5-on-5 too, guys. Like, they're not using just a typical centerman as a centerman. A winger could jump to the center. A defenseman can jump up into the rush as a wing. That, to me, is one of the major reasons why you're seeing this offense flourish, is because guys don't feel suffocated into one spot.
He's Alex Ferrario. He will be down at Enterprise Center tonight for Blues versus the Penguins. That's where he's broadcasting right now as well, putting in another long day, but he is he's enjoying every second of it, is what he at least tells us. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers here on 101 ESPN. Hey, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. We'll have some questions for Rob Cerfolio, Cardinals Assistant General Manager. He's been placed in charge of the minor league system. It's Heimblum 1, Rob Cerfolio 2, and then the Farm Director 3. That's kind of the way that they are operating right now on the minor league side. Rob Cerfolio joins us for our first conversation with him in about 10 minutes. All right, 314-399-9646, though. That is the Air Comfort Service text line to get your questions in right now. From the 314, guys, with everybody producing before this season, why did you guys not buy in before the season for the Cardinals? Really doesn't make sense how you couldn't see this coming with the talent that they have assembled.
Yeah, so they're asking us why we're bandwagon fans, BK.
Yeah.
Specifically you.
First of all, enough of that. Second of all, I have been high on the Cardinals offense for like 3 years running now.
You've been high.
You're due.
And eventually this was going to work for me where it looked good. This is the way that I thought it would look, though. And I'm not saying like it would look this productive. This is the style of baseball that I thought it would look like if the Cardinals lineup came together. They have a bunch of dudes that have varying talents. Like they have that speed and contact at the bottom. They've got some on-base guys at the top. They've got the left-handed bats. They have a nice complement of right-handed hitters now. And then you add in Ivan Herrera, who could be a true all-around hitter. This is what I was hoping, I should say, that it would look like if it came together. It's been fun to watch.
Yeah, it's not that I've never believed in it. It's just I haven't seen it. And so it's hard for me to sit there and believe in something if I haven't seen it. I'm one of those guys. So, like, the players that were here, I always knew the way that they hyped them up, the profile of the prospect, I expected them to be good, but I never got the evidence of it. So it was just hard for me to sit there and assume they were going to be great this year. It's why I think Brant Brown has been so impactful.
Yeah, my biggest skepticisms were, can you really get Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman back to what they were 2 years ago? Because it's just hard to find examples of guys that drop off of a cliff and then basically have to be 30 percentage points in OPS plus better than they were a year ago. And that's hard. And then it goes to, like, even if you – so if I didn't believe in that, then I look at the rest of the guys and I go, I don't know if you have guys that are superstars, but to your point, they're kind of going pack mentality. And I looked at that and went, can you do pack mentality? I just don't know if that works in baseball. When I think of the best teams in baseball, I think 1 through 5 is just like, holy crap, here's these superstars that are at the top of the order, and then it falls off. And I just didn't know if you could win by saying we're going to build a lineup that's 1 through 9, 10% above league average.
Yeah. I think you can win. I don't think you can win a World Series. I think that would be the way that I would look at it. Is I do think there is a ceiling to this kind of an assembled lineup. I don't think that ceiling exists in the World Series, but I think you can get to the playoffs this way. I think there have been other teams that have done it before, and I think the Cardinals are hoping to follow that model. From the 618, guys, did the Redbird Report already get canceled? Loved the first episode. When is the next one coming out? We're recording after the show today.
No, it got canceled for the theology podcast.
And Alex, how about this? We got the audio issues figured out. Took us one episode.
Yeah.
One episode of the Redbird Report.
Got it fixed.
It's figured out, my friend.
Yeah, sure. I've been complaining about that for 4 months, but yeah, you guys got it fixed. They probably just said, we don't need to hear BK's tone voice after Alex has been kindly complaining about it for 4 months, so let's just fix it. So congrats on your tone, BK.
From the 314. Guys, outside of the first few interviews of your career, were there ever any interviews or radio hits where you were legitimately nervous prior to them?
Yeah, Rob Cerfolio in 2 minutes here.
T-Bone's going to have to change his whitey tidies afterwards. Man, I think the one that I was most nervous about was when I interviewed Bobby Hull, but I was like just getting into the broadcast. I think anytime I interview somebody who is a Hall of Famer, I do get some jitters because you don't want to ask a stupid question to somebody who has been interviewed by some of the greats. So I still get nervous at times doing interviews, whether it's with current players or former players, because you want to ask the right question and you want to give the right impression.
We had Robert Irvine, if you guys are familiar with Restaurant Impossible on Food Network.
Oh, yeah.
We had him on our college radio show. Don't ask me how we booked it. We got lucky. And that guy is an intimidating presence. That was one of the first interviews where I went in and I was like sweating bullets, just nervous as hell as to what was about to take place. Ended up being great. He was a super nice guy, but that was definitely one that immediately comes to mind in this regard. But for me, like, it's not so much a nerves about talking to somebody. It's how is this going to go? Because you just never know. Is this person going to be interested in having a conversation, or are they coming on because they're trying to sell something? Are they annoyed that they even have to spend the time on the radio? That's that's where the nerves come in, is you just want to make sure that it's a good product for the listeners. And I know many times you guys probably think we do a terrible job of that, whether it's an interview or otherwise, but I promise you it is not. That's not the goal. We're not trying to put on bad radio. It does sometimes happen. You don't live up to expectations, but that's what I get nervous about, is just hopefully this goes according to plan. Hopefully our next... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, now working with BK, I get nervous if the guest that's coming on is actually the guest we think it is.
That's fair. I've earned that.
Is this actually Rob Cerfolio that's going to join us in this one?
Yeah, this is Bob Cerfolio.
I'm pretty confident this one's going to be Rob Cerfolio. Cardinals assistant general manager. He's been put in charge of the minor league system. It's him and Chaim Bloom, and then they've got the farm director below them. He's their assistant general manager, and he's going to join us to talk about all of the things that they are doing to implement changes into the minor leagues and how that coordinates with the major league level. We'll talk to Rob Cerfolio, Cardinals assistant general manager, next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. We are happy to go out to the Callier and Thompson hotline. Joining us on the YouTube stream as well, youtube.com/101 ESPN STL, is Rob Cerfolio, is the Cardinals' assistant general manager. He is in charge of player development and performance. He's joining us for his first appearance here on BK and Ferrario. Rob, we appreciate the time, man. I know it's been a long transition for you. You had the entire offseason. I know you guys were very busy. But I saw that you had the opportunity to go to opening day with your family as well. What's that transition been like, and what was your first opportunity to go to a Cardinals opening day like for you?
It was awesome. Well, first off, appreciate you guys having me on. I've heard a lot of great things about your show, so look forward to joining you and talking a little Cardinals.
All lies, but we appreciate you saying that nonetheless.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Part of the nature of my role is to be there for all our home games moving forward, or as many of them as I could, but to see the opening day festivities and have my whole family, even though my 2-year-old can only make it to about inning 3, given the rain delay, it was pretty special to see the stadium packed out for the first time and to see just, all the Hall of Famers come through and the way that the group does it here. I think a pretty cool shout out to just the business operations sides and everyone who's working behind the scenes to pull that off. It was pretty cool and fired up to be here.
Rob, for people that aren't familiar with your background, now that you are in charge of this minor league development system, can you tell our audience a little bit about what your background is, what you did for the Guardians, what led you to where you are today?
Sure, yeah. It was a 34th round draft pick, which tells you everything to know about the type of player that I was, in the sense that round in the draft doesn't even exist anymore. But was a former pitcher and really just found my way by dumb luck into the Guardians organization back in the middle of 2015. And, my role kind of grew and evolved over time. But long story short, was kind of leading the farm system as the org's, farm director the last 4 years in Cleveland. And really, I kind of think of that job as like the principal of a baseball school. And you're kind of running everything in the minor leagues, on field, off field, to help your players eventually one day impact the major league team. And, I think one of the cool things about coming over here is now, how do we build that philosophy at all levels in our organization, whether you're a major league player or a minor league player? We are always looking to get better. Player development performance is not just a minor league thing. It's a major league and minor league thing. And, that's really kind of the mindset that we want to have, that we're always looking for the next frontier to make our players just that tiny bit better on the margins. And sometimes you're thinking about that problem with a rookie ball player who's 6-7 years away, or sometimes you're thinking about that problem with a major league player that's in the lineup tomorrow. So that's what makes that problem set really fun. And, I'm lucky to have a lot of awesome people helping me out with that.
Well, Rob, you mentioned that collaboration. What is that like for you in the front office, along with the major league staff and Ali Marmol and the hitting coach and pitching coach, and then all the way down through the lowest levels of the minor leagues?
Collaborative's the word. That's you're only as good as your team around you, and you're really just trying to build great teams that are built by great people that want to constantly learn and put the player first. And then you also need to have really sound process around that, so that you can scale what you're doing to player in the major leagues, who obviously many people are thinking about, to a guy that is 16, 17 years old in the DR that no single fan knows about today, but hopefully they know about 5 years from now. So it's just, how can you run the same high quality process with people that are really smart, to be able to scale that to as many students, if you pull on my baseball school analogy, or as many players as we humanly possibly can. So the information gets better and better, and the history of information gets better and better as players climb the ranks, of course. But you're always trying to run your best play all the way down to the bottom levels of the minor leagues. But coaches, analysts, front office, like, how do we link those groups together to try and solve problems in unison is really one of the fun parts of the job, I think.
Do you have an example of that, whether that's from the offseason, spring training, or even early in this season thus far, where you guys have been able to coordinate between the minor league level and the major league level, whether that's game plan wise, player development, whatever it is? Do you have an example of something you guys have been able to do in that regard?
A handful. I think of some of the the examples of that you can see with, like a Victor Scott type name in the big leagues. And, Brownie came in and really was tapping into both our performance resources, our hitting resources. Vic is a guy that, is really invested in his career, as I've just gotten to know him a little bit, which has been really cool. So it's awesome when the player brings that type of energy right away of we're going to work really hard and we're going to be really scientific on what we're working on. And then there's a bunch of players in the minor leagues as well. I mean, I think as these guys get going here, obviously the AAA team has been going for a couple days, and AA and down gets rolling here on Friday. You'll, I think, start to see some guys showcasing new pitch types. Quinn Matthews is an example of a guy that's had a lot of success, and how do we make him better on the margins? Adding pitches like a two-seam and teaching him when's the right hitter and count to use pitches like that to his advantage, to just make him that much better, more robust, so that he can handle a major league lineup 2, 3, maybe even 4 times when he gets up to the top level. So there's a whole bunch of examples. There's a couple of them right there, but really, like I said earlier, that's a collaborative effort with both the staff that's wearing baseball pants, the people in the front office that are building the models, and behind the computers that are kind of educating us and making our player plans evidence-based, and then our performance staff too, to make sure that everything we're doing in the weight room, in the training room, is really kind of aligned towards what we're trying to do with the player from an outcome standpoint on field.
Cardinals Assistant General Manager Rob Cerfolio is joining us here on BK and Ferrario. Rob, you mentioned Quinn Matthews with the two-seam that he's trying to implement. We have also seen at the major league level some guys throwing a lot more glove side two-seam fastballs as well. There are certain organizations that they have a pitch that they're known for. Some of them it's a sweeper. Some of them it's a changeup, whatever it may be. Do you feel like that is something that the Cardinals will be getting more towards with a specific pitch or a pitch design? Or are you more of it's individualized based upon the players that we have in our organization? How do you view that from your philosophy standpoint?
Yeah, definitely more similar to the latter, right? Each pitcher kind of has their own strengths. And so I think when you're acquiring a player or you're trying to help educate a player on what are your strengths, it always starts there. What makes you great? Why are you someone that was drafted or is in AA or is in the big leagues? Like, how have you kind of made your money? What are the things that you do really well? We can never lose sight of those things, and we need to always be looking for ways to make that from good to great. And I think what you do around that is how you complete an arsenal, right? So there's a whole bunch of pitchers. I'll use my former organization as an example. An organization in Cleveland that has a lot of like north-south type profiles. But we were always thinking about adding shapes that complement those, but it has to be specific to the player. What does this guy do? How does the ball come out of his hand? What types of shapes can he create? I think if you start to anchor to one approach, you can apply those to a player that it might not fit perfectly. It's almost like the jamming a circle into a square analogy of we want something that this player can actually accomplish and do so consistently. And we feel that it really complements what he's already doing at a high level really well.
And Rob, sticking with pitching, there's been a lot of talk across baseball over the last handful of years about minor leaguers, starting pitchers specifically, not throwing a ton of innings. And the Cardinals kind of went in the reverse of that. Since 2021 through 2024, they've had 29 pitchers throw 100-plus innings in a season. In Cleveland, I noticed that you guys did that as well, and you guys even had 9 guys in that time frame throw 100-plus innings below the AA level. What is the value of having starters throw that kind of amount of innings at the lower levels and kind of push themselves as they try and develop as young starters at that low A level?
Yeah, well, I mean, this next comment's far from rocket science, so you guys can feel free to chuckle with me. But the number one way you can sustain success and provide impact on the pitching side is to consistently churn out like homegrown starting pitchers. Those pitchers, that's really hard to do, and that's why there's so few of them in the major leagues. But being able to handle, like literally learning, being able to handle a starting pitcher workload in the minor leagues is a skill. It's important. There's a lot of things that happen away from, the white lines from every fifth day that really you have to teach a player from a routines, prep, recovery, all these things that span more than just the times where a guy is throwing a baseball, but really teach them how to be resilient and durable and have like the strength and conditioning and medical routines and philosophies that allow guys to do that more consistently than others. So, I think that's one of the strengths of this organization for a long time. You mentioned that was, a thing that you saw with the Guardians pitchers, both at the big leagues and in the minor league levels. And that was intentional. I think it takes a lot of good unison between the players you're acquiring and then how are you making them more resilient and able to really handle those workloads, and not just handle the workloads, but be great at the end of the year and in the playoffs when you need guys at their best. So using the minor leagues and teaching guys to really learn that skill has been something I've believed in for a long time.
Just a few minutes left here with Cardinals Assistant General Manager Rob Cerfolio. He's joining us on BK and Ferrario, and we appreciate his time. Rob, when you look at what you guys have been able to do with the minor league system, you mentioned we're about to see some of the fruits of that labor from the offseason as we continue here with AA and the lower levels beginning tomorrow night. What would you say was the biggest change that you have implemented thus far? What is the thing that you guys have brought that maybe was not there previously? And I don't want this to make it sound like you think that the system was completely broken or anything like that, but for you, what was the biggest change that you guys made?
Yeah, I love the way that you frame that at the end there, because, for me, the whole philosophy coming over here was this is an organization that's had a ton of success. Like, let's never lose sight of that, but let's really understand, like, what allowed that to happen. What are the real systems and process in place that we feel like are working really well that we can never lose sight of? That was honestly step one. Building relationships and having clarity on that is really important to me. And then around that was, okay, well, what are the things that maybe aren't going as well, and who are the types of people in terms of roles or expertise that we can bring in? And then what are the process behind the scenes that we can scale from our top level, AAA level, all the way down to the DR, so that the way that we're thinking about what is a player working on and why is the same series of questions and the same scientific approach to building a player plan in AAA to building a player plan in the DR. So I think from the types of roles that we have added and just some of the work behind the scenes with making sure that our process is really sound and scalable across all levels, and we have people that are owning and really driving that process across, to go back to my baseball school analogy, across every grade in our system. We need a math chair, we need an English chair. So for us, that's someone that's leading catching, someone that's leading hitting, someone that's leading pitching, and that all those groups from the major league down are talking to each other and thinking about those problems in the same way. And then really integrating our performance group into those problem sets. Those would be like the areas that stand out to me, is that not that those things weren't working well, but we wanted to put extra time, emphasis, resources in way of process and people around all those ideas.
You mentioned the coordinators. That is certainly something that would fit into this bucket, but they have mentioned a number of times, the Cardinals front office has, John Mozeliak, Bill DeWitt III, they were investing this offseason in their minor leagues. And your job is a part of that, and that's part of the investment. But for fans, they see the titles, they see the names that have been added to this minor league system development. What are some of the things maybe that they don't see that you guys have invested in this offseason, whether that's tech, whether that's something that you guys see that we don't? What are some of those things that you guys have invested in this offseason?
Yeah, so, I mean, the big one's people, right? I think that's a little bit more visible in terms of who has come into the organization. Like, there's obviously some roles here on the 3rd of April that weren't here on the 3rd of April in 2024. But behind that, there's a whole bunch of tech, and some examples of that is like a force plate mount, or some examples of that is like specific bat speed interventions that, again, guys at all corners of the organization, major league down, could use and leverage and help make themselves a better player.
What is that? What is the bat speed intervention for any of our listeners that aren't familiar?
Yeah, so there's certain ways that you can develop program. It's just like a dose of medicine, right? When you have a sinus cold, you want to take some type of medication that helps cure that what symptoms you're having. There are things like specific bat speed programs, whether that's overweight, underweight training. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there in the public sphere through Driveline and other things, and we've really just tried to start incorporating those at a high level. So there is a whole bunch of tech behind the scenes, and like we talked about, just really pouring time into the process that we are trying to run at all corners of the organization. But I think one of the coolest ones, which again will become visible to fans as they show up in Jupiter over time, is the incredible investment that Mr. DeWitt and his family have made to the facilities, and how we can use that not just during spring training, but really make that a center for development all year round. And having our players train with us, with our staff in the off season, rolling into spring training, I think that's an incredible window of time to be able to leverage and use as a competitive advantage that I hope we take advantage of. And that's really only because, the DeWitts and Mo and Heim have really put a ton of time and emphasis into spending dollars in that space so that we have the best facilities in baseball.
Rob, final question from me. You guys decided this year with the first-round pick from last year for the St. Louis Cardinals, J.J. Weatherholt, to have him skip over high A ball and start the year with Springfield, the Double-A affiliate of the St. Louis Cardinals. And I'm curious, what is the conversations like when you're talking not just about a J.J. Weatherholt, but with other prospects of potentially pushing them through the system? And how do you determine how quick we want to move with the guy? What are those conversations like when you're trying to push them through the minor league system?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm smiling because these are oftentimes so much fun, and I couldn't count on both hands how many times I've probably screwed up the final decision on these as a former farm director. But, I think the big thing that you're always trying to answer is like, what's the proper developmental challenge for the player? And that's never a black and white crystal ball answer. We don't know for sure whether or not a player is ready for the next level, but we can use our intuition, and we can use some of the things that we're seeing on field to try and help answer that question. So that really is tapping into people in the organization that have a lot of experience, people in the organization that have proximity to the player, and then trying to just really answer the question objectively is like, where do we think this guy's going to be properly challenged? You don't want a player to go dominate a level, and you don't want a player to go get absolutely dominated by a level. So you're always trying to thread that needle on what do we think is going to really push this guy to become the next best version of him. And in this particular case, we felt like Double-A was the right level for JJ. And part of that's too, just, being around him longer, seeing him in spring training, trying to really think about, okay, players of similar profile in the past, where have they tended to start that first full season after they're a high round draft pick on the position player side with a similar performance skill set to what JJ has. So it's just like anything else. It's using all the information around us. It's tapping into the experience and expertise of people in the organization. And then you hope that you get those right. And oftentimes, you can't always say that we definitely did, but I think knowing how JJ works and how he prepares and the type of player that he is, I hope and I think that he'll be properly challenged in Double-A out of the chute.
Rob Cerfolio is the Cardinals' assistant general manager, joining us here on BK and Ferrario. Rob, we'll get you out of here on this one. Our YouTube chat has brought this up. You're not giving up any state secrets with what's behind you on that whiteboard, right?
I hope not, but if you need to blur it out, you guys have my full permission on that when you post it later. But I don't think so. Yeah, if there's something up there that's top secret, I doubt it.
All right, sounds good.
I appreciate that from the chat.
Absolutely, Rob. Appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much for hopping on with us today. Hopefully, we can do this again semi-regularly. Get some updates from you guys on what's going on down in the minor league system.
I appreciate you guys having me on. This was fun and look forward to it.
Absolutely. That's Rob Cerfolio, Cardinals Assistant General Manager. He's in charge of the player development. We appreciate his time here on BK and Ferrario. Coming up next, we'll get some of your reaction to that interview. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Also, the YouTube chat at youtube.com/101ESPN. We'll get to that reaction next year on 101 ESPN. All right, I thought that was great. Rob Cerfolio, super interesting to talk to. We're going to have Mike Kelly of NHL Network here in just a little bit, so we're going to have to hold this tight. Alex, what was your biggest reaction to what we just heard from Rob Cerfolio here on the show?
Man, I had a lot of them, but just to kind of isolate it to one, I really thought what was interesting was just kind of the integration of what they're trying to do with the personnel hiring and with the technology moving forward, and really how the statement he said about having guys designated into one spot and having the roles kind of systemed to those specific players in the minor leagues, I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I liked that he gave details on this stuff, man.
Yeah, it was refreshing.
He was somebody that was willing to give you, okay, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it this way, and here is how we have seen it implemented into our plan. So I think our text line is lighting up right now. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. We got this from the 618. Great interview. Loved his answers and his approach and how he handled the questions. That's the kind of approach that people want to hear, and that is what they want to feel when someone in the front office handles themselves and approaches the fan base in a situation like this. That to me is really what's important. Like, I think that the Cardinals have reached a place with some of the people inside of the organization that have been around for a really long time where it's almost the messenger as it is the message that is getting lost in translation sometimes. Like when Mo talks, I think there are times where he's actually saying stuff that's pretty interesting. Nobody wants to hear it. Rob Cerfolio is new. He is compelling. He is a guy that is more than happy to explain things to the listener. Like I asked about the bat speed intervention stuff that they're doing. I'm not familiar with that.
Went over my head.
And he flat out explained what it is that they're doing, why it matters, all that stuff. So I do think that's super important.
And he's also coming from an organization that has had success of what Cardinals fans have been desiring for the last 3 to 5 years. Like development with the pitchers, like him talking about Quinn Matthews and a couple of the other pitchers in the system. Like it really was a refreshing feeling hearing from a different voice, from a different organization who's coming in and bringing new ideas.
Yeah, I think the part that I really was glad to hear him say was how connective they are on this, right? That was something that Mo pointed out. I think it was in the first press conference of the mini in the offseason of, hey, look, we kind of got away. We kind of had almost people kind of, I don't want to say doing their own thing, but it wasn't a connective effort. And as he was saying, like, it's almost like a school, right? You just kind of got to rush these guys through these levels at the right time, but you also have to be on the same page with everybody. And that's what we saw. That's what he was really trying to emphasize a lot of, hey, we're having conversations with the Major League staff. We're talking with the guys. We're talking with our roving instructors. That's the important part of making sure that everybody is on the same page. And I know that was one thing that both Mo and Chaim Bloom really sought after this past offseason.
I think you're going to see a lot of their fingerprints on the pitching development, too. Mm-hmm. Like, it's one thing. We've seen the hitting. I think their hitting approach has honestly been okay for the most part. They haven't developed stars, and that's as much a major league problem as it was a minor league thing. But I think the pitching has really been where you've seen some issues for them. And his background is as a former pitcher, and the Cleveland Guardians, hey, what worked for them? Well, the pitching side of things. Their guy that's in charge of the pitching development right now came from the Seattle Mariners, who might have the best rotation with young arms that have been drafted and developed into their system of any team in Major League Baseball. So to me, that's really where it's worth monitoring, is seeing what's changed with these guys down in the minor league system. Who is having more success? What is the process looking like down there? So I do want to have Rob Cerfolio on again in the not too distant future, maybe a month down the road, to see, okay, you guys made these changes. You were hoping to see X, Y, and Z. Have you seen that? Is this going as you had intended? Ultimately, you're going to be judged on your successes and failures as much as you are your process, even though that may not be what it should be. That's what it is. It's a hard job, man. And I'll be curious to see what it sounds like the next time that we have him on to find out more of what that process is leading to in terms of the results. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. If you guys want to check us out on YouTube, you can always do that at youtube.com/101 ESPN STL. Coming up next, Mike Kelly has called the St. Louis Blues a wagon. He's one of the numbers nerds, and I say that affectionately over at NHL Network, and he joins us next here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues back in action tonight as they host the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario. Then Alex will join Joey Vitale for Puck Drop at 7. This Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. And earlier today, Mike Kelly on Twitter tweeted out the following. Gloria vibes. The Blues go for an 11th straight win tonight, defense leading the way. And then he goes on to compare the 11-game winning streak in 2019 to the 10-game winning streak in 2025 and what they did defensively in those two stretches. Mike Kelly is an analyst for NHL Network, and he joins us now via the Callier and Thompson hotline. Mike, we appreciate the time as always, man. That is certainly the comparison we've been making here in St. Louis. What did you find as you looked into the comparison between 2019 and 2025?
Look, there's similarities for sure. And the exciting one, if I'm a fan, like fans want to see your team score goals, right? You want to hear the goal horn. You want to get up in your seat. The defensive similarities to me are A, more important, and B, more kind of closely associated when you look at the two winning streaks. So they're obviously when a team wins 10 or 11 games in a row, they're going to have some crazy numbers. St. Louis is first in goals against, and they were in 2019, the same thing. But goal probability, so what is the team actually allowing in front of their goaltender? Also first. So that shows you that the process is really good. The goaltending's been really good on top of that. The end result is you're giving up, a goal and a half a game or just a bit less. Difference this year with St. Louis as well. Off the rush, they're giving up nothing. Like 3 chances a game. The league average is like 6.5. It's a lot of comps, and Corey Schneider, I thought, put this really well when I was on NHL Network with him last year. He said a coach told him once that offense is kind of like a cat, like it can come and go. You never really know what to expect. Defense is like a dog, where it's loyal and it's dependable, and it really just comes down to effort, and I think you can see that pretty clearly with St. Louis.
Mike, how surprising is that to you? Because I know you've seen the analytics of the Blues defense for the last couple of years, and you're talking about new faces being a Ryan Suter, who's 40 years old, and a Cam Fowler from Anaheim, who I think a lot of people, when he was traded, said that his best was behind him.
Yeah, it's a little surprising, not overly surprising, because St. Louis overall for the year, they're third in expected goals against. So that's just what you allow. And again, the goaltending, frankly, in the first half of the year wasn't great. It wasn't as good as it certainly is now. So that's why you saw more goals against. It wasn't so much about the team defense, which has been pretty good. Obviously, since Jim Montgomery came over, really good. And he's had his fingerprints all over this team. So, I'll be perfectly honest with you. Coming out of the Four Nations break, there's a model that I use, the company I work with, SportLogic, that I really place a lot of value in for its predictive nature. And it looks at a few different things. There were 2 teams that really stood out as these teams might go on a big run here post Four Nations. One was Tampa Bay. The other was St. Louis. And I didn't have the guts to say St. Louis. I said, hey, watch out for Tampa Bay coming out of the break. And they've been great. But I thought St. Louis, they might do all these things well. I just still don't know about the goaltending, and that's been rock solid. So if I had more faith in myself, I would have put that out a while ago.
Mike Kelly here on 101 ESPN. Mike, the question that we've been asking here locally, and I'm sure many nationally are wondering the same thing. Okay, they're on a great run right now. They've been unbelievable since the Four Nations face-off. But what does that mean? Like, when we get into the playoffs, is this a team that can actually continue this run? Can they sustain it? Whether you're looking into the numbers or you're watching it, what do you think on that? Do you think this is a team that can actually be not just a contender to get into the playoffs, which they needed this run to do, but somebody that can actually go deep into the postseason?
Oh, I think they can make noise. There's no question about it. This is not a okay team on a hot stretch. This is a good team on a hot stretch. And the other thing that I found just so impressive about this run is and I did the math on this not that long ago. When they got to 9 wins, they had played those 9 games in like 15 days or something crazy like that. They had back-to-backs. The schedule is kind of brutal, and they just keep winning. So, I think they can make noise in the playoffs. Now, does Winnipeg scare you that much, really, if you get Winnipeg? I think St. Louis against Winnipeg, and I would do a dive on this before it started, but I think that's a fine matchup for them. Vegas, tough team. If you get Vegas, sure. But like I said, the way St. Louis is playing, that's a recipe for success. And their top 6 is as good as anybody's right now. Neighbors has been a great fit where he's playing. You think about even the top 9, I mean, is solid. If Prey goes back, it's just another ad. It's a good team.
Mike, Robert Thomas is one that I think the NHL doesn't talk enough about. And if you look at his numbers from Four Nations break on, he has not only been one of the better offensive centermen in the game, but he's been one of the better defensive centermen in the game. What do your numbers tell you about Robert Thomas compared to other stars or superstars in the NHL?
Yeah, I love that you said that. I was having this discussion with somebody yesterday who was asking, they vote on the awards and was asking about Selke Trophy stuff, and they didn't have Robert Thomas on the list. And I said, have you thought about Robert Thomas? And he said, oh, that's a good one. I could look a little more into that. I think, and again, I haven't gotten all the way to the end of awards research or anything like that, but I would have Thomas. Voters fill out a top 5 ballot, and the top 3 are named finalists, and somebody wins. I would have Robert Thomas as top 5 for the Selke right now, I think for sure. And I'd drill down deeper to see if I would have him top 3. I haven't gone that far yet, but I'm glad that obviously the people in St. Louis are knowledgeable fans, and I'm sure they see it. And I'm hoping that more people around the league notice that as well. It's not just the defensive; it's the whole thing. Like you said, he puts up a ton of points. He's a star center. Like, you can win with him as a number 1 center. I don't have any doubt about that.
Mike, the other guy that has opened our eyes this year is Dylan Holloway. He was part of that offer sheet offseason for Doug Armstrong, and everybody's talked about that at this point. Holloway is on pace for 30 goals. He's on pace to have the second best plus-minus on the team, and that's not some mirage. He's been one of their best defensive forwards as well. I don't think anybody saw this coming from Dylan Holloway, but what is your level of surprise in what he has been, and what do you think he can be for this team?
Yeah. Well, a great question. I kind of view this as like this is a best case season for Holloway, which isn't to say that next year will be exactly the same. Like, he's played so well. I think the consistency that he's played with has been really impressive for a younger guy who's come into a new team. But the point totals, like and you talk about the defensive side also, his speed, like, you guys notice this, his speed is so disruptive on the ice. He can make something happen like that offensively, but he can get back and break up a play defensively. It's like disruptive is the word I would use with his speed and what he can do. So he's in a great situation. I, again, remain shocked that Edmonton let both of those guys go. And Doug Armstrong, for what he's done, not just those guys with the offer sheet, but with the coaching decision. Fowler, like you talk about, if he's not a finalist for the GM of the Year award, and I think Chris McFarland in Colorado's got a great case. There's a few guys, but Doug Armstrong's got to be up there.
And what about Jim Montgomery, Mike? Because he's another one that we've talked about, and I know it's only half of a season, maybe 2/3 of a season when he was hired in November, but depending on how this ends, could he be in the Jack Adams nominations?
How could he not be, right? Given what he's done with this team, I think he has to be. Like, St. Louis is in at this point. We've got them at our model at 94% to make it. Like, they're in. It's where are they going to finish? So I don't know how he couldn't be, frankly. And I've got to know Jim a little bit over the years, just a handful of conversations, but have been able to kind of ask him some questions, things that I think are interesting, and just what do you value? What does it take to win? Those kind of things. I've talked to other coaches about him as well. Look, there's 32 coaches in the NHL. They're all great, obviously. They're at the top of their profession. But there's going to be a coach that's the best, and there's going to be a coach that's 32nd, and everything else in between. Anyone I've ever talked to about Jim Montgomery, like, I've heard words like coaching savant, top 5, top 10 for sure, just in the respect that he has from his peers. St. Louis is very fortunate to have him.
This is absurd, Mike. You in our conversation, you have mentioned that they might have a Silky Trophy finalist. They might have a Jack Adams finalist. Doug Armstrong probably up there for GM of the year. Now they're basically a lock to get into the postseason. Mike, a month ago, we were talking about what does this team do? They're at a crossroads. Do they sell? Is Braden Shin going to be on the Toronto Maple Leafs at the deadline? Like, how rare is what we're seeing right now? You have more of a national scope on this, and you've been around the game forever. What the heck? How did this happen?
Yeah, it doesn't happen often. And I never really liked the phrase either of the playoffs of, like, get in and anything can happen. Like, in the East, Montreal's in the 8th spot right now. They might get in, right? Anything's not going to happen. They're not – I say that. A few years ago, they went to the Stanley Cup final. That was a weird COVID thing, but in general, no, it's not get in and anything can happen. Like, you need to have a good foundation, be playing a certain way at a certain time, all that, right? Look, it's rare, it's unique. I know I've been pumping St. Louis's tires, and if the Bruins had me on radio today, it would probably not be as positive a conversation just to pick a team, but. The fact is, there's a lot to be positive about. I'll say this because it can't all be roses, I guess. If and when St. Louis does lose before the end of the year, and I'm sure they're going to lose a game somewhere, maybe a couple, maybe 2 in a row, I think the first thing you'll notice is that the offense, they scored a goal in a game and didn't win. The offense, to me, is really exceeding kind of what's behind it from a process standpoint. So that may dry up a bit, but again, they've been so good defensively. I don't think it's going to mean they're going to start losing a bunch of games. That's just the area I'd pinpoint and say I think they're getting some good fortune there as well.
Mike, final one from me before we let you go, and we appreciate the time. Big picture here, like beyond this season, and I know it's an unknown, but you're talking about a ton of guys who are 25 years or younger. Defensively, I know they're the same situation with a couple of young guys like Broberg and Colton Parayko, and with a pipeline. Like, what do you think big picture looks like moving forward with this Blues team?
Well, it should be pretty positive for the reasons you just mentioned, right? They do have a lot of young players and good players. Like, I watch Broberg on a lot of nights, and this is, even with Parayko, whatever, I'm like, that guy could be the best defenseman on the team, the way that he's played. He's been great. Holloway, we already talked about him. Jimmy Snuggerud's come in now. That'll be another young, exciting player to watch. So it's not a team that's aging out. And again, kind of the tough part as well is if and when they make the playoffs and they win in the first round against a division winner, and that would all be great. It's like, what are you getting in the next round? Because that's Central Division, man. They got some monsters in there. So I think if you're a Blues fan, you're probably sitting there right now just super happy. Your team's going to be in the playoffs. They got a great shot to win in the first round. You go from there, right? And they all went through this 6 years ago and saw what's possible, not just by making it, but making it with a good foundation and legitimately being a really good team.
It's that you nailed it. That's exactly the way that most of the fan base is kind of taking this in right now. That Red Wings game the other night was just the latest example of them finding ways to continue to impress us. Mike Kelly can be seen on NHL Coast to Coast tonight at 7 o'clock. Plus, NHL Network will air NHL Now live from Washington, D.C. tomorrow at 3 o'clock ahead of the Blackhawks versus the Capitals game. Of course, Ovi searching for history there for the Caps. Mike, we appreciate the time as always, man. Thanks so much for hopping on with us today. Hopefully we'll be able to talk with you again soon as we potentially preview a playoff matchup for the Blues. This is crazy.
I know. Yeah, you got it. And anytime your teams in your market, whatever the sport, when you win 10 in a row, give me a call. I'm always happy to talk about good stories.
That's what we're here for. Hey, Mike, appreciate the time, man. We'll talk with you again soon.
Thanks, Mike.
All right.
That's Mike Kelly, NHL Network analyst, joining us here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, everything he said there, we've talked about, right? Yep. We've talked about the defense. We've talked about Dylan Holloway. We've talked about Jim Montgomery. We've talked about Doug Armstrong. We've mentioned all of these things here locally. And locally, they're huge storylines, of course. I think nationally now, people are starting to latch on to some of those storylines. And listen, man, maybe this is small time of me. It's cool to hear national analysts saying, yeah, you guys have a Silky Trophy finalist. You guys have a Coach of the Year finalist. You guys have a GM of the Year finalist. And it almost gives credence to what we've been talking about here locally. And it adds a little bit more weight to that.
It does. I mean, big picture, I think this team is setting themselves up. I mean, he just mentioned Broberg could be one of the best defensemen in the game, watching him. Dylan Holloway, you just heard him talk about with the speed and what he's done. Do you guys view Anze Kopitar and Alexander Barkov as superstars in the National Hockey League?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I think we could start talking about Robert Thomas being a superstar. I mean, like, look at the numbers. Like, Kopitar has had one 90-point season, but otherwise, in his career, he's been somewhere between 60s and 70s. But he's been a Selke Trophy winner multiple times. Barkov, again, not a guy who puts up 90 to 100 points. It's typically around, like, 60 to 80. But he's won Selke Trophy conversations. Patrice Bergeron, go ahead.
One other thing that they've done. Those guys have playoff success as the top guy, and that's, I think, the next thing for Robert Thomas. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. But to be fair, we haven't really seen that. We've seen him in, 2-3 postseasons?
Totally.
And his first one, the long one, he got injured in that Stanley Cup run when he was a rookie. But, yeah, you're right. The playoff success is where guys get labeled as stars. The Selke Trophy, man, once you win it, you're typically always in the top 3. And if Robert Thomas can crack that top 3, which I agree with Mike Kelly, I think he should be up there. He probably won't be, but top 5 is a good spot to be. Like, for the first time in a really long time, I think you can actually start having the conversation of the Blues having a star, maybe a superstar, when you consider some of those other guys in the NHL.
He is Alex Ferrario. That is Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. If you've missed any of our show from today, I personally think it's been a pretty good one. Check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. That is sponsored by
Schaefer Door Company.
When you go over there, you can see our conversation with Rob Cerfolio, Cardinals assistant general manager that we had at the beginning of this hour, and Mike Kelly of NHL Network as well. Coming up next, we're going to dive into the junk drawer here on BK and Ferrario.
Alex Ferrario here to tell you about Rhino Shield, who can upgrade the exterior of your home. Look, we did this back in 2020 with our home, needed a new look, needed a fresh coat of paint, and then I called Darren at Rhino Shield, and he corrected me immediately. He said, we don't use paint. We use ceramic coating that is significantly different than paint because it's going to stick 8 to 10 times better than what the paint you're going to buy over the counter at the hardware store. And this is the biggest thing, man. When you use Rhino Shield's work, you set it and forget it. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about having to redo your home the next year if you guys get a ton of rain or if you get a ton of sun that hits your house. If your house is just directly in the sunlight, those UV rays can deteriorate it. Darren's work 100 times better than what you're going to use if you just use some type of paint. And I can speak to it because we used it for our home. There's tons of houses in our neighborhood that have used Darren, and I've had a couple of neighbors come over and ask me who we use, and I've kind of directed them towards Darren over at Rhino Shield. Give him a call today. Darren will come out. He'll give you a free estimate. He'll walk you through the whole process. His team is incredible. You schedule the appointment for them to come out and get the work done. They get it done that day that they put it on the schedule for you, and it looks brand new. It's all backed by a 25-year transferable warranty. Tell Darren Alex Ferrario sent you. 877-25-RHINO, 877-25RHINO.com.
We got this text from the 314. All right, guys, I'm on a sugar high. Thanks to Mike Kelly for that. Now level out my insulin a little bit. Interview Keith Law or something. I got to bring down my current high that I'm on.
No, we need Jim Bowden. We need Jim Bowden.
Yeah, Jim Bowden's the guy. Keith Law, for some reason, taking that one. I like Keith Law.
Wasn't Bowden the one that told us you'll get one pitcher and you'll be happy with it this offseason?
Yeah.
You also said your team was not good. You're not going to the playoffs.
That was this year when he was right.
That's right.
Bowden said your lineup is the worst in Major League Baseball. Like Jim's the one that levels out your insulin, so let's give him a call.
What also leveled out my insulin over the last 24 hours, Alex? So I'm sure there are people on the text line that probably knew this was going to happen. YouTube chat as well, youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. You guys know I'm planning to renovate my basement for the upcoming week. I'm taking off tomorrow. We're starting it tomorrow. Yes, it's going to be longer than a 1-week process, but we're starting the process this weekend.
I like how you're taking off to do that because you're not going to do any work.
Okay. My dad's coming in. He's going to help me out.
There it is.
I got to be there for moral support, you know? Dude, I had no idea how much of a problem this was going to be. So we have asbestos tile down in the basement. We got to figure out what to do with that. We've got some issues with the walls. It's this whole thing, man. And at every step, you're like, all right, I think we figured this one out. And then the next step you begin and you're like, no, now here's this that we have to overcome now. Just don't do it, ladies and gentlemen. Just don't do it. Get to a place in your life where you are so successful, you're more than happy to just have somebody else do it for you.
Yeah, I've done a couple of different renovations with our old house and then the one we live in now. And I can honestly say every time you do something that you think is not going to be that difficult, it opens up 17 other wounds. We, at our old house, I mean, this was like a 50-year-old house. So it was our first one that we bought. Yeah, and our bathroom, it looked like something out of Hostel. Like it was like neon yellow lights. It was disgusting. The bathtub was just old, and so it was a tiny bathroom. And so I told Katie, it's like I could do this. Like it can't be that difficult. And if we need help, we can get help. And so I ripped the bathtub out. And we found out that they put the bathtub in incorrectly. And so there was probably 15 years worth of carpenter ants that were just nesting behind the bathtub because they didn't put the proper coverage on it. And then when we lifted the floor up, they didn't put the piping in on the toilet properly. So water had been leaking for 15 years every time you flushed the toilet, and the wood had rot on the floorboard. So we were like, this should be an easy project. Next thing you know, $15,000 later, we had to have all of that stuff taken care of. So now when Katie's
Holy
like,
crap.
Plumbing is no joke. Plumbing, electrical, those are the two things that, even when my dad's out, we're not messing with that. If we run into any issues with either of those two things, we're calling somebody, Dad.
And it wasn't even plumbing. I guess it was the plumbing, but it was so the water had rotted the floor that was basically covering the bathroom in our basement. So they had to drill the floor. Like there was a hole from the bathroom to the basement, and they had to put new floor joists in there. And when he told us that, I looked at Katie and I said, I am never doing home renovations again. Yeah. Never. It's just going to be, it is what it is.
Hey, man, better that you found it than it, sinks in.
Oh, yeah.
That was the other alternative is 10 years later, you guys are still thinking everything's fine because you didn't do any renovations and then you fall through the ceiling.
And when we told the people that purchased the home from us, we were like, yeah, and we did a brand new basement. And Katie was like, we should probably tell them what the problem was. And I said, we will not tell them what the problem was. We will tell them.
Alex, I'm going to stop you there. Don't mention anything further. From the 314, is this the guy that can't change a tire? It sure is. I've gotten better, right?
No, your dad's been fine with it. And
I've been improving.
Just to cover myself, I told them that the bathroom was fixed and it is brand new.
Thank you.
That's what we told them.
Thank you. All right, coming up in 15 minutes. Cam Fowler has completely changed the course of this Blues defensive core, and it's not just for 2025. We'll get into that coming up here in about 15 minutes or so. But coming up next, the Cardinals' offense has been incredibly impressive for the first 6 games of the season. I don't know if this is what we should expect the rest of the way. What do we think it's going to settle in at, though? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. The Cardinals have been one of the most impressive and productive offenses in Major League Baseball so far this year. They are hitting about 300 as a team. They have a couple of individuals, most notably Mason Wynn and Wilson Contreras, that have not been living up to expectations thus far, but I think that's going to change, and yesterday might have been the start of that for both of them. I do not, however, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but I do not think that you'll see half of your roster batting .450 by the end of the year. Again, could be wrong on that, but Lars Nootbaar's currently batting .415. Arenado's at .400. Victor Scott at .350. Jordan Walker at .400. Ivan Herrera's at .467. I don't think that's totally going to sustain in that way.
It's like the 2013 Cardinals lineup.
But Alex, based on what we have seen so far this year, how do you think this lineup ends up settling in? What are your expectations that are revised after our first homestand of the year?
Oh, that's a good question. I look at, you don't ask a whole lot of them, man. So I feel like you should get your credit when you deserve it. I look at a couple of players as like, yeah, I think they can maintain this. Now, obviously not .450 batting average, but like in being an impactful bat. I look at Lars Nootbaar. And I also look at Ivan Herrera. Like, I think Arenado is going to come back down to earth at some point. You mentioned it, Wilson Contreras is going to kind of go back in the opposite direction. But I look at Lars Nootbaar and I look at Ivan Herrera and I say these guys can be consistent difference makers for the Cardinals. Because I think Ivan Herrera is a middle-of-the-order bat. We've talked a lot about this. It's just a matter of where's he going to play because I know they don't like him. Got to get that hands team in. But when you see a guy hit 3 home runs in one game, you know that the pure power is there, and that's a prototypical middle-of-the-order bat. And then I really think Lars Nootbaar could be one of the better leadoff hitters in the game. So those are the two players that I look at after 6 games in a season and say, yeah, I think they can maintain something close to this, like be considered all-stars, Nootbaar and Ivan Herrera.
Yeah, I think the offense as a whole can settle in around like 10 to 12th in Major League Baseball. I feel like that doesn't feel overly aggressive, considering I thought they were like 20 to 22. Me and Bowden were hanging out together when we were looking at the lineups across Major League Baseball. But it just comes down to what will determine their ceiling is what happens when baseball adjusts again to Scott and Walker. Those are the two guys, because I think Lars Nootbaar, he's not going to sustain this, but I feel like you can write in pen what he's going to be for a season. It's just a matter of, does he stay healthy? And then how much more does that really propel them as an offense if he's able to play 150 games compared to 105 games? Ivan Herrera, though we don't know what the ceiling is, I know he's a good hitter. And I know he's probably not a guy you can write in pen what he's going to be. I know he can put the bat to the ball. Same with Alec Burleson. Arenado we'll see if the bounce back is sustained. The two guys that I just don't know what to make of yet is Walker and Scott. I like the adjustments that we have seen from those guys, and it feels different from what we are seeing. But I know what's going to happen is baseball's going to figure out something, and the question for me is going to be, okay, what does Jordan Walker and what do Victor Scott do? Do they listen to Brent Brown then when it worked early on in the season and say, hey, what's going wrong? Brent Brown gives an idea of, hey, let's try this. Do they adjust to that? Because if they don't, then you're really going to see that offense kind of start to trickle back down to earth. I
think there's some truth to that. I had other players, though, that I pinpointed. You mentioned you think that you can write in pen what Lars Nootbaar is going to be. I don't know about that. I think in terms of the batting average and on base percentage, that may be true. The question that we've always had about Noot is, can he slug a little bit more than he has? Because for his career, he's been like a league average and maybe even a little below league average slugging percentage guy. He's around .420 over the last couple of years in his slugging percentage. 10, 15 home runs, 20 doubles. Now, he's playing 115 games, so maybe you'd expect that to go up a little bit, but that's kind of what he's been. Can he be more than that on the slugging percentage side? Because I do think you should expect it to come back to earth on the batting average. It's not going to be a team that hits .298 for the season. Nobody will. There are not individual players that hit .298 nowadays, much less teams. So
Dodgers will.
Yeah, maybe. That's going to come back to earth eventually. The on-base percentage is at .380. That's like a Hall of Fame level on-base percentage. Again, that will come back as the batting average starts to drop. What could stay high for this team if you see Lars Nootbaar slug more than he has, and he's at two homers through the first 6 games. If Nolan Arenado continues to swing a hot bat and hit for power, he has 2 doubles and a homer so far this year. If that can continue, and if this is real for Ivan Herrera, And he's more than just a high average, high on base percentage guy, but he can also incorporate more of that slugging percentage. 2 doubles, 3 home runs on the season so far for him as well.
Oh, hell yeah.
If that can continue, you can make up for the drop in average and on base by the increase in the slug. And then you add in the speed. Mason Wynn potentially getting on base more often, adding that speed elements to things. Jordan Walker has shown you he's more than happy to steal a couple of bags as well. That's where you can kind of, it becomes all right, if this goes up, this comes down. You can meet in the middle, and you can still have an extraordinarily productive lineup, even if it doesn't necessarily look the same that it has so far. To me, it's the slugging percentage that I'm going to be circling on. Does that continue? Can you maintain this from the guys that are hitting the crap out of the ball right now, at least a few of them that have the potential to do so, but haven't necessarily been that over the last couple of years for you?
I think you're going to get a really good tell on this road trip of if what we saw was just going up against bad teams or if what we saw is like Brant Brown making a difference, because you're talking about the Red Sox pitching staff, and then we looked at it, they're taking on Skeens and Keller, correct? In the first 2 games?
Yeah. That's the way that it's scheduled right now, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're going up against 2 of the elites in terms of Skeens and Keller on the Pirates side of things, and then the Boston Red Sox have kind of reshaped what their pitching staff looks like. Now you're going to find out, was this just an opening homestand to open up the season where they get that extra momentum boost and you go on the road and you lay duds, or you're going up against good pitching and you're continuing to crush the baseball?
By the way, I'm not one of those that believes this has been about the pitching for the other teams. The Twins have good pitching.
Yeah, I agree with
that.
The
Twins have a lineup that I don't believe in. If you want to be skeptical of the Cardinals, any aspect of what they've done through the first 6 games, to me, it's the pitching side of things, because they have not gone up against great lineups thus far. And so if you're saying, hey, that's about the level of competition, totally understand. It's a fair critique. And it's more than okay to be like, I want to see what they look like against the Boston lineup or against that Philly lineup or Houston's lineup or the Mets lineup. Like, those will show you more of an indication on what this pitching is going to be. And frankly, the bullpen hasn't exactly held up great against the Angels of all teams. The offense, though, you have not gone up against terrible pitching. Like, Yusei Kikuchi is a good starter, man. He was on a
number 3.
He is on a really good team, like a really solid number 3. And against the Minnesota Twins, you went up against Pablo Lopez and fared pretty well against him. He's a stud. He's a legit number 1 starter in Major League Baseball. No. So I don't think that the lineup, what we've seen thus far, is about the competition. I think that is, hey, man, they've got a plan and they're going out there and they're producing. Major League Baseball will adjust, and that may change some things. But I have less of a question about the offense because of the competition and more about the pitching for me.
It's going to sound super negative of me, but I felt like the Pablo Lopez game approach was against, like I thought you had that home opener vibe boost, and I wonder if it looks the same when you go up against Pablo Lopez in the middle of the season.
Yeah, I think they're hitting. For me, Lopez, I think the jury's out now on if he's a 1 after his last season, but I think he's a stud, and him and Kikuchi have been after my heart for the last 4 years on this show. But if Lopez is a 2, look, nobody's going to hit 1s very well. I mean, Skeens 100%. Is clearly a number 1 starter. You know, I think they avoid Crochet in this series against Boston. If you went up against him, that's a legitimate number 1.
The current scheduled starters are Buehler, Fitz, and Newcomb.
Yeah, like those are guys that if you are a good offense, you should hit those guys. Skeens the one guy that I don't care if you're the Dodgers, you're going to have a tough time going up against him. So that's why I would look at it, and I would get some skepticism if Pablo Lopez isn't a number 1. Okay, that might be fair after his season last year. But, I mean, they still hit him. They put competitive at-bats out there. I agree with your point, BK. I think their pitching is the one that we just don't know about because those lineups, I agree. I thought that was more about, man, that Twins lineup does not look good. The Angels lineup does not look good once you get past, like, their 3-4 hitters.
Yeah, that's my biggest question right now. And, man, as you look at who they are going against in this Boston series, they got really fortunate.
Yeah.
They got really fortunate on who the expected starters are going to be going into this series. Really, it's that Pittsburgh series. And then have you seen who's scheduled for Philly right now?
No. Oh, is it Wheeler and Nola?
Yeah.
Oh, baby.
And Sanchez, just for good measure. Let's go ahead and throw him out there as well. So that's when you'll really find out. If you can produce like 5 hits against Wheeler and a couple of them are extra bases, oh boy, this offense is going to be amazing in 2025. That is next weekend. This weekend, you've got Boston. Next weekend, you're back home against the Philadelphia Phillies. It's a lot of fun to watch right now. Hopefully, it continues to stay that way. Speaking of fun, Cam Fowler has been that for the St. Louis Blues. Top 5 among all defensemen in 5-on-5 points since he was traded here to St. Louis. What has he added to the blue line, and what does it mean for them, not just for this year, but moving forward? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. Really good piece out earlier today, and it was highlighting the most underrated defenseman in the NHL. Now, if Colton Parayko were still healthy, I think he would have been highlighted in this because he certainly fits into that criteria. But the blue that they went with instead, and he's more than deserving, was Cam Fowler. They wrote the following: Fowler has scored 9 goals and 30 points in 45 games since joining the St. Louis Blues. 25 of those 30 points have come at even strength. That ranks top five, among all defensemen since his trade to St. Louis. The Blues also lost Parayko to injury early in March, and despite that, they've gone 11-1-1 with Fowler stepping up hugely in Parayko's absence. He's driven a commanding 58% of scoring chances while on the ice and has helped the Blues outscore opponents 14-7 during his 5-on-5 minutes since Parayko's injury, end quote. Alex, what Cam Fowler this year, and it's been a longer stay than what we saw from this. It's what Nick Leddy was for them a few years ago, where it's like, hey, they just needed somebody to solidify that spot in the lineup. The difference, though, to me is, man, he also has the ability to help you for years to come. I'm not somebody that's interested in giving him a contract extension this offseason. It's not something I would do. I would wait this thing out so that way you don't potentially fall into another mistake the way that you did with Scandella, the way that you did with Nick Leddy. But, man, what he's doing right now, it's hard to argue otherwise. He's been a huge piece of what the Blues have had going right in this last 10-game stretch.
Yeah, he has. You asked me the question during our show prep, has there been another trade that you can remember that has had an impact like Fowler to where he's been there beyond the year that they acquired him? And I mentioned Scandella, but you had to re-sign him. The other one that I completely forgot about that's almost the same situation is when the Blues acquired Jay Bouwmeester. Now, they got him at the trade deadline, but he still had 2 more years on his contract at $6.6 million that the Calgary Flames had given him. And then after those 2 years, then the Blues re-upped him and kept him here until, of course, he had to retire. So it's odd, too, because it's the same scenario. Like when the Blues acquired Jay Bouwmeester, he was a 31-year-old defenseman who people were like, yeah, he's a top 4 defenseman without question. But the back years might not be there for him. But they brought him in to be a mainstay with Alex Pietrangelo, and it worked all the way up until that team won the Stanley Cup. So Cam Fowler, in my opinion, was the best trade acquisition by a team in the National Hockey League this season. And you look at Brandon Carlo, the guy that we talked about, BK. Yeah. Brandon Carlo was traded for Fraser Minton, so equivalent of a first-round pick. That's their top prospect. A 4th-round draft pick in 2025, and a conditional first-round draft pick in 2026. So they got 2 first-round picks for Brandon Carlo. The Blues have got Cam Fowler for a 2nd-round draft pick in 2027 and a prospect who is playing in the East Coast Hockey League still for the Anaheim Ducks.
That's crazy.
Cam Fowler would have gone for the equivalent of 2 first-round picks if he would have been held on to until the Anaheim Ducks. And the Blues got him at 50% salary retention. It's the best trade by any team in the NHL.
See, I actually don't agree with that first thing that you said there, that if the Anaheim Ducks had held on to him, he would have gone for that kind of a price. He would have if he was playing like this for them. But I don't think he was going to play like this for Anaheim because the situation wasn't conducive to him playing this way. I mean, you look at any of the numbers, and hell, people that watch the film and break it down as well, they were all like, yeah, it's a fine pickup. He's okay. He's kind of vanilla ice cream. He's going to go out there and he's going to stabilize things, kind of similar to Nick Leddy in that regard. Different players, of course, but there's not anything super exciting about their games. And yet he gets here, and it's like, what do you mean there's nothing exciting about his game? The guy's going in on 3-on-3 overtime and has this backhand that he's winning the game for them with. Like, he's been a huge contributor, not just defensively. This is a guy that's been a legit points producer. I mean, you look at it over the course of the season, if you just paced his points out, Alex, he'd be like a 55-point producer for the Blues this year if he continued producing this way. It's nuts.
I still think a team would have given up a lot. Anaheim would have asked a lot, and I think a team would have given it up for him because everybody has their own scouting department. Everybody sees Cam Fowler and says, man, he does not look good on Anaheim, but could we put him in a scenario where he has a lot of success? And
then why didn't they do that, though?
Because Cam Fowler got to pick where he was going to go.
Exactly, but that wouldn't have changed.
No, it wouldn't have. But if a team was desperate enough and he agreed to say, like, go to the Toronto Maple Leafs, because, look, Cam Fowler was going to go somewhere that had a shot to win. That's what he wanted to do. If a team needed a defenseman, like the Toronto Maple Leafs did, and I'm not saying the Maple Leafs were on his list, but if a team needed a defenseman, they're not going to look at his minus 45 from the last 2 seasons and say, nah, he's not worth it. They're going to overpay because they need a defenseman, and that's a guy that they could say, yeah, we could get better out of him than what he is.
Regardless of which side of us is right, the ultimate conclusion here is Army was right. to get this done early. And this is so rare for general managers. I know Milwaukee deserved all the praise in the world a few years ago when they went out and they got Willy Adames. And they did that in like May. And it was just, they were super smart about it. The Tampa Bay Rays at the time had a young shortstop in Wander Franco that they wanted to get up to the big league level. And there was really no spot for Wander Franco at that point in time, and the Rays needed some more pitching, so they just made the swap. Milwaukee had the pitching, they needed the bat, and Tampa Bay had the bat but needed the pitching, so they made that swap, and it was so early in the season, and it's very rare that you see moves made that early in the season. The same thing was true here. You know, it was the exact kind of thing that the Blues needed to allow themselves to become this version of the St. Louis Blues. And now what they are is one of the most stifling, most difficult defensive teams to go up against in all of the NHL. We talked about it earlier today with Mike Kelly on the show. They're giving up nothing in front of the net, man. They're giving up no rush chances against. It never happens against them because they've got great skating defensemen. Good luck trying to get out on a rush against them. It's crazy.
Yeah, and all of it, and why I think the Blues are such a threat to people, it's the same reason that the Vegas Golden Knights are a threat to people. They have so many established, knowledgeable defensemen on the back end that mistakes are very few and far between. And, like, you've got 4 guys who have played over 1,000 games in the National Hockey League on your back end. You've got a group of guys that has been through every scenario. It's why I said I think this defense is better than what they had in 2019, and the future might be brighter because you've got such a young Philip Broberg. But no matter what happens in a game, Fowler, Suter, Falk, Leddy, they've all seen it, and they know how to handle it. And when it happens, it's why you can stay in games no matter what the score is. You've got that type of knowledge on your back end, which every team desires specifically in the playoffs.
I know we always talk about chemistry on this show, and we get into, like, do you win first? Is the chemistry first? Like, what is that, right? There's also an interesting conversation to be had about the mix of veterans and young players and youth and experience versus having that experience that you're just talking about there, Alex. The Blues, I don't know if this has stumbled into it. I don't know if this was by design, and I'm not sure, honestly, if it matters. They have the right mix right now. They have the exact right mix where you can put Jimmy Snuggerud out there because who's the guy that he's with? It's Oscar Sundqvist. Mm-hmm. I don't think you would want to see Jimmy Snuggerud and Dalibor Dvorsky and Zach Bolduc out there together. I don't think that's the winning recipe. That's not the way this team has gone about it, and I don't think that would be the smart way for them to go about it personally. Maybe that is a line that could be out there in the future for you. I think it absolutely could work. But for right now, they have done a really good job of incorporating experienced players with their inexperienced guys or bringing guys along slowly, like a Zach Bolduc, where it's like, okay, you're outproducing what we would expect from a third-line player. Let's get you some opportunities up there on that top line. Let's see what that looks like, right? But he has to establish himself first as you're capable of this. It's what Ollie does with his bullpen, where he has guys continue to rise up the ranks, where you start out in the 6th, and then you get to the 7th, and if you work out there for a few different times, maybe we get you into the 8th, and so on. It's just been a really impressive thing to watch and to monitor throughout the season, Alex, where I think you're right. That experience is super important for them on that blue line, but it's also the mix that they have. Tyler Tucker working with Ryan Suter. It's been great. You see Oscar Sundqvist working. It's only one game, but I think it can work with him and Jimmy Snuggerud. And if you just said, hey, look at these two guys, do their games mesh? No. I don't think Jimmy Snuggerud makes any sense whatsoever with Oscar Sundqvist. But this is a team that just seemingly finds ways to make this stuff work for them.
You know, we were spending a lot of time comparing it to the 2019 Blues team because obviously the 11-game win streak. But, you know, you and I, BK, have compared it to that 2011-2012 team. And honestly, they're almost identical to what that team did. Now, obviously the points aren't there, but they changed the head coach in the middle of the season and bring in an established savant, as Mike Kelly called Jim Montgomery. And Ken Hitchcock was that guy 13 games in 2011-2012. But that roster had 37-year-old Jason Arnott, 37-year-old Scott Nickel, 36-year-old Jamie Langenbrunner, 34-year-old Andy McDonald, 30-year-old Barrett Jackman. But they also have 19-year-old Jaden Schwartz, 22-year-old Alex Pietrangelo, 23-year-old Berglund and David Perron. And look at what happened. Arnott moved on after that year. Langenbrunner moved on after that year. but they implemented all of those young guys into a line with a 37-year-old centerman and a 37-year-old winger and a 31-year-old defenseman so that the young guys had coverage. And that's what 2011-2012 opened up that winning window, and it's why Blues fans, in my opinion, should be so excited for what the next 10-plus years might look like.
The Blues back in action this evening. They're going up against the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Penguins, by the way, they have played 7 games since they last beat the Blues. That was the last time that the Blues had a loss. The Blues in that same stretch, Alex, this is dating back to March 13th, so it's about a 3-week stretch here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games.
Yeah. Pittsburgh hasn't played since Thursday, and the Blues have played twice since that time frame. The schedule is absurd.
Man. It's absolutely insane. There are just certain teams that never play hockey. I'm convinced of it. Calgary's one of those. They never are in action. I don't understand how this took place, but the NHL, there's something amiss.
Well, the good news is, just like the middle of the season and the beginning of the season, Calgary never played hockey, and they'll never play hockey after the third week of April.
There you go. That's a good point by you. All right, Blues back in action this evening against the Pittsburgh Penguins. You'll be able to hear Alex Ferrario on the call and the pregame coverage beginning at 6 o'clock. The Puck Cancer second shift charity hockey game is this Friday night at the Centene Community Ice Center. You can tune in on Friday afternoon to hear the Fast Lane broadcasting live before the game, 2 to 6 o'clock at the E&B Granite Studios. Tickets are on sale right now for the second annual Puck Cancer event. See the Blues alumni face off against the Blackhawks alumni in a rivalry game that will support Siteman Cancer Center and the Jimmy V Foundation for Cancer Research. Grab your tickets right now to the game Friday night to support those two great organizations, and then tune in to pregame on Friday afternoon. Fastlane, live from the E&B Granite Studios out at the Centene Community Ice Center. Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. It is time for Believe It or Not here on BK and Ferrario.
For a limited time at Verizon, you can get our best price ever for a single line.
Tanner Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues look to win their 11th in a row tonight as they take on the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario. Then Alex will join Joey for Puck Drop at 7 tonight here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Cardinals off today. They'll be back in action tomorrow when they start a 3-game set with the Boston Red Sox. 1:10 will be first pitch tomorrow. Walker Buehler on the mound for Boston. Eric Fetty will get the start for St. Louis. And if you missed it, we had the chance to catch up with the Cardinals' new assistant GM, Rob Cerfolio, earlier on in the show. If you missed any of that interview, you can check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. The Sports Update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Three 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are believing it or not here on BK and Ferrario. Unfortunately, today we cannot sing for you. Alex is out on remote, which means it's a whole thing. Basically, long story short, he can't hear the song, so it would be a little difficult for him to time it out on when his part is. So, yeah, that's why we can't do it today.
Look, nobody wants me just going straight. No music. That's going to be bad.
Are there people like on the ice? Would it be awkward if you were like singing out loud right now?
There's actually people to both booths left and right of me.
Awkward.
They're cleaning, so yeah, honestly, it would have been very.
Yeah.
I would have done it too. I don't care. It would have been fun and entertaining.
All right, let's play a game of Believe It or Not. My first one for you guys. Believe it or not, the NL Central gets multiple playoff teams this year.
Ooh, I know why we're doing this because Atlanta has been god-awful early, but I don't think that continues.
But it's not just them. The Mets have no pitching, which seems important. They're 3-3 on the year. Those are the two big ones in the NL East, where everybody thought they were going to have potentially up to 3 teams in the playoffs, and now maybe the Mets still get in, but it might be as little as 1.
Obviously, pitching doesn't matter if they're 3-3, man. The Atlanta Braves have pitching, and they're 0-7. I'm going to say not believe this. I still think the only team that gets in is coming out of the NL Central.
I know what happened. If I say believe it, I have to convince myself the Cardinals are a playoff team because I think they're the second best team in the Central. Because I don't think it's Milwaukee. Watching them the first week, Pittsburgh doesn't have an offense. Reds,
2 weeks after T-Bone says they had 100 losses in them.
Reds, I don't believe in. You know, what the hell? I'll believe it. I don't know how the Braves recover from this 0-7 start. And like the Mets, I've been out on them because of the injuries, and I think it was one of their lefties had a setback. I think it was Manaea had a setback, so he's out another 2 weeks on top of what he was going to be out already. So I'll believe this. I think there will be another team that gets in with the division winner in the NL Central.
I'm still going to say not believe it because I do think that the NL West is making up for what we thought the NL East was going to be. The Padres have been every bit as good as we expected them to be. They are 7-0 to start out the year. Everybody's talking about the Dodgers and their 8-0 start, and they should. They've been unbelievable.
Don't give them that much credit.
Not that it's a surprise. The Padres have been every bit as good so far this year. Giants have, interestingly, started 5-1, and then the Diamondbacks are 4-2 as well, and they're a really good team, man. They had talent last year, just didn't really come together for them. So I think it might just be taken over by what the NL West is going to do this year. Alex, what do you got for us today?
Guys, believe it or not, after we talked with Mike Kelly and heard the potential for awards, the Blues have 4 players or coaches or general managers nominated in the top 3.
Ooh, 4 finalists for awards this year. I think it might be Robert Thomas. Robert Thomas might get up there. I think you will see Doug Armstrong in that category. Maybe. I don't know how people are going to view this, man. Hockey feels like they would be some that I don't think they're going to give the credit that is probably due for Jim Montgomery. So, and I don't know who else you're going to get in the award winning. I'll take the under. I think you might even go under 3.5.
Yeah. I think I'm going to say not believe it either. I think I agree. I think it's going to be. I think Monty will get his votes.
Top 3.
Yeah, I think he will. I mean, no offense to Drew, but we saw what the Blues looked like under Bannister. It wasn't this. I think he'll get a lot of credit for that. I think it's going to be Thomas, Army, and Montgomery, and then I don't know about that 4th one, and that's why I'm skeptical. So I would say not believe it.
I'm believing it, and I think the 4th is Bolduc. Bolduc has the most
Rookie
goals.
Of the year. That's a good point.
of any rookie since the Four Nations break. And it's going to be tough because Michkov's got the points, Celebrini's going to be winning it, and you've got Dustin Wolf and Lane Hudson. So it's a good company to be in. But, man, if he finishes these final 6 games and gets goals in 3 or 4 of them, I think he's going to be top 3. So he'll be my 4th.
That's a good call. That's the one that I was missing. I'll still say under just because I'm skeptical on the Monty thing. With me being half a season.
Totally understandable.
Guys, believe it or not, we will see the St. Louis Blues hand out 3 or more contract extensions in the offseason.
This one I will believe. I absolutely will believe this.
And the guys that can be eligible.
3 plus, right? Not more than 3. 3 plus.
3 plus. Guys that will be eligible: Broberg, Bolduc, and Holloway. A Texier if you're feeling frisky.
Matthew Joseph.
Hofer.
Sonny.
Walker.
Hofer is a good one, T-Bone.
I forgot about Hofer.
Fowler, too. Fowler, they can engage him with an extension.
I'll say I'm believing this. I think it will be more. I think it'll actually potentially be more than 3. Because Hofer's going to get one done. He's an RFA. He's got to get some kind of a deal. He'll get an extension.
Bolduc will, too. They're going to lock up their core this offseason. Like, I think Holloway and Broberg are going to be approached about deals. I think Broberg, Holloway, Bolduc, Hofer, and then I would say Radek Faksa. I think he's going to get a contract extension. And part of me wonders if Suter comes back for one more year.
Yeah, I believe this. I think it's going to be 4. Hofer, Holloway, Broberg, Bolduc. I don't know about the Foxen one. I could see where maybe they try and change that 4th line center, or they look at it and say, hey, Sundqvist will just bump down to the 4th line. We don't need to bring back Radek Faksa. I'm kind of with you. I would bring him back, but I would say they do 4.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not. If you guys have a scenario, we'll tell you if we are believing it here on 101 ESPN. From the 314, believe it or not, City will score a goal this weekend.
Ugh.
Not
until proven otherwise.
Why? Yeah. Don't act like they haven't scored this year.
Not many.
They've scored like 1 in every game.
Yeah, I think
match. Sorry.
I don't know have they scored multiple goals in a match. I don't think they have.
I think they had 1, if I'm not mistaken.
I thought.
Yeah, they had 1 game against LA Galaxy where they scored 3-0.
And outside of that,
other than that, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0.
I'll say no.
I'm going to believe it. I think this will be the week that they do it because they are playing their rival in KC, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they stink.
They're bad. They just fired their coach. I don't know if there's really a big coaching change bump in soccer because it happens all the freaking time. So I'm going to say believe it. I'll say they win 2-0. That'll be my guess.
Kansas City's coach has been there for a really long time. He's kind of a staple within the organization. So this was a big firing. It could actually go the other direction where everybody is not in a good place.
It's plus money across the board for everybody in this. Draws plus money, St. Louis plus money, Sporting KC plus money.
Feels right.
How did BK say the City update the other day? He's like, they haven't scored. They're bad. Let's move on.
Oh, wow.
More or less. Close enough. Wow. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for Believe It or Not. Last one here for you guys. Believe it or not, Nolan Arenado hits at least 30 home runs, 100 ribbies, and will be back in the top 10 of MVP discussions by the end of this upcoming year.
Ooh.
Or this year.
I don't
30
think
homers,
he hits
100 ribbies.
I don't think he hits 30 homers. I think he hits maybe 25. And if you're not hitting 30 homers, I don't know if you're going to get 100 ribbies, so I'll say not believe it.
I'm not going to believe it. It's mostly just the home runs. The way this offense is clicking, I could see where he ends up being a guy that drives in 100. But I agree with Alex. I don't know if he's getting to 30 bombs this year. I think it's going to be anywhere between 20 to 25.
That's kind of where I think 25 home runs. I think he could have a year very similar to what it was in 2023. And I know at the time that felt very disappointing coming off of his unbelievable 2022 season. But he's playing better defense this year. And if you get that kind of defense out of third base with roughly that offense, 265 average, hit 26 homers, 93 ribbies, I think you can live with that because the offense around him is much deeper than it was back in 2023. So I'll say I'm not believing this, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm overly pessimistic about his outlook. It just means I don't think he's going to get all the way up to that ceiling. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Coming up next, we'll hit the rewind and shut things down for you heading into tomorrow's show on BK and Ferrario. If you guys missed any of our show today, be sure to check it out afterwards. 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. That podcast is sponsored by
Schaefer Door Company.
Had a great conversation with Cardinals assistant general manager Rob Cerfolio. If you're interested in the process of how guys get from the minor leagues to the major leagues, he is a big part of that now within the Cardinals organization. It's Heimblum number 1, Rob Cerfolio number 2, and then you get to the farm director, which used to be like the top guy in charge. They've added some titles to that side of things. Cerfolio is a big part of it. He was a great guest earlier today. We also had Mike Kelly, who told us the Blues aren't just a good story. They're not just a decent team, and they're not just on a good run. This is a team that is a real contender in the postseason this year, and the Blues are back in action this evening against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Alex will be on the call for that, and he is going to have your pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock. Alex, what's the number one thing you're looking for tonight in this one?
How do they handle Pittsburgh's defense? If you guys remember, that was the last loss that this Blues team had, and Pittsburgh's defense, Monty said earlier today that they did a really good job of boxing the Blues out from getting to the front of the net. It's how Tristan Jarry had so much success. So it's going to be a matter of, can you establish your net front presence? You weren't really able to do that against Detroit. That's why it took so long to score. So they're going to have to find a way to get back to that, because they have trailed in 2 of their last 3 games. So maybe finding a way to get out on top and finding a way to get it net front presence on this Penguins team.
I'm mostly interested in the offense. I mean, you look at it over the last 3 games, it hasn't quite been the same. 3-2 against Nashville, those were late goals. 2-1 against Colorado, late goals. Last game, they barely scored until there was 30 seconds remaining. Late goal and then overtime goal in that one as well. Can you get off to a better... I know this is the classic cliche thing, right? Get off to a good start. It does feel really important for them right now, because that's not something that they have been doing lately. Can you play a little better in that first period? And then we know what they can do in the third. They've been great in those situations. They simplified their game. They've been awesome. But can you get a little bit more out of your offense in that first period? That's the number one thing I'll be looking for tonight.
It's been a week, too, since Hofer's played. The last time he played was last Thursday, I think, when they played Nashville. So it's going to be Hofer, who's played well. He's also undefeated in this win streak. So what does he look like against Pittsburgh? That is playing without Evgeny Malkin tonight. They don't have Malkin playing in this one, nor do they have another one of their wingers on their third line.
No pressure, Hofer. We're just going for 11 in a row. Tie the franchise best.
Not a big deal.
This is also the last one like this, right? They've got that game against Seattle down the stretch. But after this, Colorado, Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Utah. 4 of your last 5 games are against legit Western Conference teams that are at least in contention right now. So it does not get easier after this. This is the last of what was a relatively easy portion of their schedule. Alex Ferrario will have the entire call tonight. Pre-game coverage with him starting at 6 o'clock. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Again, if you missed today's show at all, be sure to check it out on the podcast page after the show today. I will be off tomorrow. The guys will have you taken care of for that. I'll talk to you guys on Monday at 11 a.m., though. The Fast Lane's coming up next here on BK and Ferrari on 101 ESPN.